Hello there, welcome back to the stream. This is SaSeshen, and we are going to get right into it. Today's stream, I was actually going to bring up the Mexican elections, as you can see in chat. The fact that there were 37 assassinations during this historic win where Claudia Sheinbaum ended up winning the election and becoming the first presidente of Mexico. However, apparently the news is so egregious recently that this barely lasts a day or two or a week in the news cycle, even for international news. Instead, we have our current sitting president, Joe Biden, passing an executive order basically denying asylum and refugee status to migrants as a solution to the problem of the crisis at our border. Hello there, Ocean. I'm just letting everybody know what we're going to get into today, and then, well, we will be getting right into it. There's articles and there's videos that we'll be watching, of course, for this Biden executive order. And then we're going to get into the Merrick Garland versus Matt Gaetz, which I'm a little surprised that Matt Gaetz, I thought he had his own legal issues. Wasn't he accused of and found guilty of pedophilia or potentially wrongdoing by adopting his son of something like that? I thought he was a problem and had been since removed from office. Apparently not. And so my little office journey here is going to require me to be a little bit more up to speed. And Dre Romy, hi from Boston. Nice to see you. Flower is received. And then overall, we're going to talk about the U.S. economy and how, well, citizens in general are being very negatively impacted by the current state of affairs. What we always hear in the news is that the stock market is up, the economy is booming, but really that just means the graph of rich people's feelings is going well. Can you purchase more today than you could yesterday, the week before, the month before, a year ago, 5 years ago? The answer is no. If the answer is you don't have more strength or power or influence in your own workplace over your own faculties, over your own future and career, then the economy is not better for the working class. And that's when we get back to the discussions about the 99%. So without further ado, let's get to the video discussion here. We got ourselves a Joe Biden. He's announces his executive action. So we're going to probably do a little bit more listening than commenting because I don't want to jump the gun, as it were.
Clear bipartisan deal. It was the strongest border security agreement in decades. But then Republicans in Congress, not all, but walked away from it. Why? Because Donald Trump told them to. He told the Republicans, it has been published widely by many of you, that he didn't want to fix the issue. He wanted to use it to attack me. That's what he...
I guess we're going to do a little bit of commenting after all, after only just 25 seconds. This is par for the course, though. Donald Trump probably did say these words. I'm not going to confirm or deny. I don't really care if he did. Because the fact of the matter is he has been campaigning on this issue, and what we have seen is the Democrats have done similar things with Roe v. Wade. For how many decades? For nearly half a century, the Democrats said, if you do not elect Democrats into office, you're going to lose Roe v. Wade. And while Democrats were in office, we lost Roe v. Wade. And now they're campaigning on, well, if you vote for us again, we'll get it back. Meanwhile, 77 anti-LGBTQ laws have been passed across the country, and some of the most egregious abortion laws violating women's body autonomy have been passed throughout the country. So, sitting there with your stony face and, attitude, kind of foolish, because the Democrats are doing that and more, just on a different political subject.
What he wanted to do was a cynical and an extremely cynical political move, and a complete disservice to the American people who are looking for us to not to weaponize the border, but to fix it. Today, I'm joined by a bipartisan group of governors, members of Congress, mayors, law enforcement officials, most of whom live and work along the southern border. They know the border is not a political issue to be weaponized. The responsibility we have to share to do something about it. They don't have time for the games played in Washington, and neither do the American people. So today, I'm moving past Republican obstruction and using the executive authorities available to me as president to do what I can on my own to address the border. Frankly,
So, I know, I said we're going to do more listening than talking, but it's not my fault. I have not watched this. I have not listened to it. I did no prep work. I am seeing this as much as you are. Like, this is the first time I'm seeing it. Hopefully this is the first time you're seeing it. He just said he's going to use the power of the executive office to the best of his ability to address this issue. Meanwhile, he's doing literally nothing to deal with the healthcare crisis. He's not solving the student debt crisis. He could have legalized cannabis and marijuana and reinstituted hemp as America's #1 cash crop. He could have passed laws for clean energy initiatives, especially with solar and hydrogen power. That was 5 things in probably less than 15 seconds, right? So the list really and truly goes on. Corporate accountability, for one. Anti-corruption, for another. The list truly does go on. That he has the ability to impact with the executive order. Now, to a greater or lesser degree, right? There are obviously powers that the executive branch has and doesn't have. So it's not like he could dictate the budget, for instance. That is deliberately and directly, constitutionally placed into the hands of Congress. So he can't executive order the budget. But he can damn well be like, hey, we can do X, we can do Y, we can do Z to facilitate better facilitation of the budget, disbursement, what have you, to include lessening the burden on taxpayers, people with student loan debt, medical debt, so on and so forth. There are a myriad number of things that he could do and that I would do in this office. So let's not get it twisted. He's trying to look tough on the Mexican border to appeal to conservative voters who might be on the fence now that Trump is a convicted felon. This is all political theater. And there's more than one video that we will be watching about this, but we'll see how far we get into this 24-minute video.
I would have preferred to address this issue through bipartisan legislation because that's the only way to actually get the kind of system we have now that's broken, fixed, to hire more Border Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges. But Republicans have left me with no choice. Today, I'm announcing actions to bar migrants who cross our southern border unlawfully from receiving asylum. Migrants will be restricted from receiving asylum at our southern border unless they seek it after entering through an established lawful process. And those who seek to come to the United States legally, for example, by making an appointment and coming to a port of entry, asylum will still be available to them, still available. But if an individual chooses not to use our legal pathways, if they choose to come without permission and against the law, they'll be restricted from receiving asylum and staying in the United States.
So that seems fairly reasonable. Let's take a look at that. Asylum process for the United States. Let's go ahead and Google that. To apply for asylum in the United States, you must be physically present in the United States, and to apply for asylum, you should file the form I-589, application for asylum and for withholding of removal, with the USCIS within 1 year of your last arrival in the United States, unless you qualify for an exception to the 1-year filing date. So, what is he like? What's the hang up here? Right? I mean, this whole lawful versus unlawful process. You have to arrive in the United States. Then you get to apply using one of these forms. Fingerprinting and background checks. Receive an interview notice. Then there's the interview. Asylum offer makes determination, which I can see why we wouldn't have enough officers for that. And then you receive your decision. None of this has a timeline to it. None of this has X, Y, or Z. And you have to be within 1 year. So, I mean, like, port of entry. Okay. So what? Are we talking about travel? Are we talking about visa? Are we talking about work? Are we talking about education? This seems to be pretty draconian. And if we're going to deny people based on unlawful entry, which is okay, but for the sake of argument, not that I personally agree with it, but for the sake of argument, the statement, we want to ensure the lawful entry to our country, fine, let's establish that as the baseline. The process doesn't really explain to you how to gain lawful entry. And of course, what is the lawful entry that is qualifying to even get the asylum seeking in the first place? And again, if it is just simply a traveler's visa, right, then what limitations might there be? For instance, if somebody is just coming across the border from Mexico and they have their Mexican passport and they want to come into America, just straight up, by just driving in their whatever vehicle, is that sufficient? Do they have to fly here? Do they have to do something else? Right? Can they just walk across the border? I mean, many of these people are fleeing detrimental circumstances. They probably don't have a car. They have whatever clothing is on their backs. So can they just walk up to the border? And if the answer is no, then we are negatively impacting, once again, a very vulnerable population. So if we're not going to address that, but then unilaterally deny asylum or other, he's going to continue on, I'm sure, then we aren't actually solving the issue. What we are doing is creating an even worse humanitarian crisis at our border.
This action will help us to gain control of our border, restore order into the process. This ban will remain in place until the number of people trying to enter illegally is reduced to a level that our system can effectively manage. We'll carry out this order consistent with all our responsibilities under international law, every one of them. In addition to this action, we recently made important reforms in our asylum system, more efficient and more secure reforms. The goal is to deliver decisions on asylum as quickly as possible. The quicker the decision means that a migrant is less likely to pay a criminal smuggler thousands of dollars to take him on a dangerous journey, knowing that if in fact they move in the wrong direction, they returned around quickly. And 2 weeks ago, the Department of Justice started a new docket in the immigration courts to address cases where people who've recently crossed the border they make a decision within 6 months rather than 6 years, because that's what happens now. Additionally, the Department of Homeland Security has proposed new rules to allow federal law enforcement to more quickly remove asylum seekers that have criminal convictions and remove them from the United States. My administration has also recently launched new efforts.
Now, I'm going to be a little petty with this question, but it's worth mentioning. Criminal histories, right? If you look in America, right, there's minor misdemeanors, traffic violations, there's regular misdemeanors, and then there's felonies. Are we talking felonies? And are we also including non-violent offenses, right? Are we talking about victimless crimes as well? Again, these are things that need to be made clear, very clear in this discussion, because if we're just going to arbitrarily, it's like, oh, you have a speeding ticket or a parking ticket, and we're going to deny you asylum, that seems to be the language that he is allowing to be used, and that is not acceptable.
To go after criminal networks that profit from smuggling migrants to our border, and incentivize people to give tips to law enforcement, provide information that brings smugglers to justice. We're also sending additional federal prosecutors to hotspots along the border and prosecute individuals who break our immigration laws.
See, this is the part, though, that, like, okay. And I keep saying like a lot. I feel as if I am in high school again and I'm just ruining the English language. Wow! Thank you, Oshun. Did not realize how loud that is, though. Let me adjust that, because that scared the Jesus out of me. But as I am adjusting that that volume, I would like to continue talking about how we are, again, not addressing the right issues. We're not addressing the right topics. And the fact that we don't have the personnel to deal with the influx of illegals coming across our country, but we're going to send more prosecutors and more law enforcement and more federal agents anyway. Sounds like a misnomer. Again, what it's really sounding like is we're trying to militarize our border, much like North Korea and South Korea, and make it dangerous in general. Adding more violence or the more threat of violence or deterrence, it does not improve relations or situations. They only get escalated, especially when shall we say, the social belief or mindset among law enforcement and border patrol and this, that, and the other along those areas is already very anti-immigrant to begin with. That is a very dangerous set of circumstances to be establishing.
One other critical step that we will be taking, and that is made a huge difference. We continue to work closely with our Mexican neighbors instead of attacking Mexico. And it's worked. We've built a strong partnership of trust between the Mexican President Lopez Obrador, and I'm going to do the same with the Mexican-elect President who I spoke with yesterday. We've chosen to work together with Mexico as an equal partner, and the facts are clear. Due to the arrangements that I've reached with President Obrador, the number of migrants coming to our shared border unlawfully in recent months has dropped dramatically. But while these steps are important, they're not enough. To truly secure the border, we have to change our laws, and Congress needs to provide the necessary funding to hire 1,500 more border security agents, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle the backlog of cases, more than 2 million of them, 4,300 more asylum officers to make decisions in less than 6 months instead of 6 years, which is what it takes now, and around 100 more high-tech detection machines to significantly increase the ability to screen and stop fentanyl being smuggled into the United States.
Now, that was about the most presidential thing I could hear about. Here is a problem. These are the resources we need to address the problem, and why and how these resources will be effective in addressing the problem, which is spelled out very clearly. Now, do I believe we need 1,500 more agents on our border? No, I don't. I'm pretty sure the machines to check on the fentanyl would probably be better, and I'm sure we have technological means to monitor our border that would be significantly better than, armed agents who are looking for an excuse to be aggressive. But for the sake of argument, to critically analyze the statements of our president and his addressing the issue, what he just said is actually fairly reasonable. It's not what I personally would do, but it was well thought out and explained, and that is a level of transparency that we are just not used to seeing.
These investments were one of the primary reasons that the Border Patrol Union endorsed the bipartisan deal in the first place. And these investments are essential, remain essential. As far as I'm concerned, if you're not willing to spend the money to hire more Border Patrol agents, more asylum officers, more judges, more high-tech machinery, you're just not serious about protecting our border. It's as simple as that. I believe that immigration has always been a lifeblood of America. We're constantly renewed by an infusion of people.
Thanks for the follow, Vifro.
New talent. The Statue of Liberty is not some relic of American history. It stands for who we are as the United States.
It's who we should be.
I'll never demonize immigrants.
Clear.
I'll never refer to immigrants as poisoning the blood of a country. And further, I'll never separate children from their families at the border. I will not ban people from this country because of their religious beliefs.
I kind of would really like to see if somebody could quickly fact check if the Biden administration has been separating families at the border. I'm fairly certain there hasn't been any legitimate Muslim bans or anything like that, but I'm fairly certain the practice is still to separate children from their family members until whatever excuse they want to make. So,
I will not use the U.S. military to go into neighborhoods all across the country to pull millions of people out of their homes and away from their families, to put detention camps while awaiting deportation, as my predecessor says he will do if he occupies his office again.
Well, and to a degree did.
My very first day as president.
If you remember, there were some of these events happening during the Trump administration. There were immigration officers going into the major cities, hunting down illegals, and what we found was that many of the victims just happened to be brown in communities that were also brown, and there was never any real ramifications or accountability to be had from those activities. So it is a valid point to say that that's not something we should stand for, but it is something that has already happened. Of course, historically, it happened with the Japanese internment camps, and if we go even further back, it's the Trail of Tears, slavery, and everything else. So our country has very much so a history of doing these things. I'm certain we are still doing it to a greater or lesser degree, and obviously Trump's rhetoric is what it is, but he has also shown, Trump, that he is willing to do those things. The question is, how much of that is the Biden administration still doing, and how much has that actually been addressed? I don't currently have the answer to that. We could go ahead and live fact check this, but at this rate, we're not going to get through the 24 minutes.
I introduced a comprehensive immigration reform plan to fix our broken system, secure our border, provide a pathway for citizenship for dreamers, and a lot more. And I'm still fighting to get that done. But we must face the simple truth. To protect America as a land that welcomes immigrants, we must first secure the border, and secure it now. The simple truth is, there is a worldwide migrant crisis. And if the United States doesn't secure our border...
I'm only laughing because it's so... So if there's disillusionment with the government and disassociation with reality amongst either side of the political spectrum, there is some cognitive dissonance as well. Why is there such a major migrant crisis in the world? What is possibly going on all across the globe right now? And what nations are responsible for those events that are causing the migrant crises all across the globe? And in fact, let's talk about that for a second. Where are these migrant crises happening? Is it in Western Europe? Is the migrant crisis happening in Spain, France, Germany, Britain, Hungary, the Netherlands, Italy, Greece? Is it happening in the United States or Canada? No, it's happening in Mexico, South America, Latin America, and it's happening in the Middle East. What has been going on in those geopolitical regions over the past, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years? Could it be a mix of the Cold War effort and the global war on terror that has basically unstabilized or destabilized the Middle East entirely? Could it be the constant and consistent involvement of the United States in democratic elections in South America, where socialist and communist party leaders ended up winning those elections and then were assassinated and replaced by dictators? Could it have anything to do with U.S. foreign policy? I'm curious. Just throwing that out there.
There's no limit to the number of people who may try to come here, because there's no better place on the planet than the United States of America. For those who say the steps
Man. And according to all polls, America isn't even in the top 20 best countries to live in terms of freedom. And that's actually, I believe, Iceland, followed by the Scandinavian countries, and then a few other, I think Japan is in the top 10, and then you get back into Western Europe, and then somewhere at the very bottom of that list is America. So
taken are too strict, I say to you that be patient. And goodwill of American people are wearing thin right now. Doing nothing is not an option. We have to act. We must act consistent with both our law and our values as Americans. I'll take these steps today, not to walk away from who we are as Americans, but to make sure we preserve who we are for future generations to come. Today, I've spoken about what we need to do to secure the border. In the weeks ahead, and I mean the weeks ahead, I'll speak to how we can make our immigration system more fair and more just. Let's fix the problem and stop fighting about it. I'm doing my part. We're doing our part. Congressional Republicans should do their part. Thank you very much.
Before he gets into that, which, okay, cool. That was his statement. We're going to get some questions and answers. Fantastic. What could we do to address the immigration problem as it currently is? We've already discussed or heard that there's a 6-year backlog for asylum seekers. 2 million people that need to be processed in some way, form, or fashion. So why is there such a backlog? Is it truly a personnel issue or is it a process issue? If it's a process issue, surely there can be some automations, and then the person that does the finalization can be like, yep, all the checks and the whatever else. And then there's the technological aspects, right? Again, why can't these forms be online? Why can't they go through a digital scanning process? Why can't the background check be done immediately and then an answer be spat out immediately? Isn't that exactly how it works at an airport? You show your ID, it scans. Are you on some sort of list? No? All right. Have fun in wherever the hell you end up going. The second thing is cost. I know from my own personal family experiences, the means of becoming naturalized is expensive and long. It's 2 years and it's several hundred or several $1,000s. Now, most people, he mentioned paying thousands of dollars for smugglers. Okay. Well, if they had the money for that, but that was not enough money to go through the proper processes, then clearly, the issue is cost and accessibility. And those are things that we can easily address. And I know it sounds like I'm saying, well, why don't we just open the border and worry about it later? There are a myriad different ways that we can do this without it being an open border. And if you go to my website, samronan.com/issues, I do address this directly through the America Works program and the border crisis. I address it 2 different ways. For one, we could have a migration to work program and that work to citizenship program as well. It's literally a pipeline like, hey, yep, you're dealing with a problem. We have a solution and you're going to benefit our country. You're going to give back to the country directly, implicitly, safely, lawfully, and not be taken advantage of by other employers. Which doesn't get talked enough about enough either, is that, well, illegals are taking our jobs. Okay, but somebody is hiring them. There are people hiring them to illegally take your jobs in the factories, in the fields, on the construction sites, doing whatever job it is. Somebody is paying them, obviously not what their minimum wage or what have you, but somebody with capital is utilizing that capital to take full advantage. Oh, Trump won. Welcome back. I guess you unfollowed and refollowed. I appreciate the coming back, though. You'll find that I'm an equal opportunity. Earlier, it was called the double hater. I am not pro-Biden nor pro-Trump, by the way. I'm not pro-Republican nor pro-Democrat. Some of my policies may lean Republican. Some of my policies may lean Democrat. If I ever find myself running for office again, I will run at the appropriate level of office, and I'll run in the appropriate primary for said office. For one, the Democratic Party does not have fair and free primary elections at any level of government. So chances are I'll probably never run as a Democrat. I don't see myself running in an unfair primary where I wouldn't even have a chance to be heard or to speak in the first place. Especially since my name isn't even Kennedy. A Kennedy couldn't even get the Democratic Party to hold a primary. That's insane. A dynasty member of their party wasn't even allowed to speak and be heard. So Joe Schmo me is certainly not going to have a chance. At the very least with the Republican Party, although overall the platform is not something I agree with, would at least allow me on the stage if I met whatever criteria. And that's the major difference. Now, back to the border crisis. Imagine, if you will, an America Works program where, one, we do exactly what happened during the Great Depression and the beginning stages of World War II, which is basically, hey, we're the government. We need things to be done. nobody has a job because the economy crashed thanks to the stock market and billionaires going, well, millionaires at the time. You get where I'm going with this. There's a lot of labor to be had and a lot of labor that is needed. So why don't we address this issue directly, right? We can put our citizens, give them work, tools, labor, and access to the training and resources and tools to do the work that we need in this country. A lot of it is infrastructure. I would actually argue for, in terms of what the federal government is currently in charge of and can regulate and facilitate, it would be our infrastructure, whether that's highways, whether that's our railway systems, our energy grids, and our, of course, natural resource. We could absolutely fund and facilitate a high-speed rail development system right now. We could fiber opticify the entire country. We could clean energyify the entire country, either as part of the high-speed rail system or as part of some other mechanism. That would generate tens of millions of jobs. And that's not my word for it. That is literally scholarly articles stating that a high-speed rail transnational system, especially in the coastal New England coastal area and the western coastal areas, and then across the center of the U.S., would generate tens of millions of jobs in construction and all this other stuff in the beginning, and still maintain over 2 million jobs throughout the life of that system. Now, we can go into the numbers of the real unemployment. We want to call that 4%. What's 4% of 150 million? I believe it's around 6%. Feel free to fact check me. Oh, I'm sorry, 6 million. 6 million. So 6 million people, that is a 4 million person deficit to get this stuff built. We just talked about a 2 million backlog in the asylum seeking. So there's 8 million. We still have a 2 million deficit. Now we can start talking about the real unemployment numbers, which is people who have given up or people who are working 3, 4, 5 jobs just to keep a roof over their head. Now, instead of having 3 or 4 jobs, they would have one highly paid, federal funded, backed, what have you job, and there's your remaining 2 million people just for the high-speed rail infrastructure. Now we integrate fiber optics. Now we integrate clean energy initiatives. And all of a sudden, we're starting to see 15, 20, 30 million new federal jobs, jobs with a pension, jobs with training, jobs with skills, jobs with significant pay. And then, of course, because these jobs are happening throughout the country and are going to facilitate a lot of work in place, you are now establishing more community centers and locations. You're either expanding them or you're building them outright. And not to be cliche, but a lot of the migrants from Latin and South America find themselves in the construction fields, maybe because it's simple to get into, and there's a lot of maybe unscrupulous business owners that are willing to look the other way for people who are willing to work hard. Maybe there's just an influx of that skill set there. Don't know, don't really care. But we could potentially have millions of migrant workers facilitating a boom in development for housing and expansion of cities, towns, and communities in general. That's schools, that's hospitals, that's universities, that's libraries, that's post offices, right? That's homes, whether it's single-family homes or multi-unit apartment buildings. Imagine if we could build cities in months instead of decades, right? China can literally build a metropolitan city in a year because of their workforce and their technology and the way they, facilitate these things. Imagine if the United States did the same thing. We could eliminate the housing crisis overnight. We could truly help facilitate our own inner migratory problems, right? There is stagnation in our country. There is limitation to leave the place of your birth. Most Americans never travel more than 50 miles from the place they were born. Like, it's unfathomable to most people in Europe and Asia besides to have never moved or lived or traveled beyond where you grew up. It's unheard of, and yet one of the largest, most wealthy countries on the planet, that is exactly what we're dealing with. And we have the means to address this issue. And yes, that could even be done by executive order. But the benefit of addressing our border crisis is we could literally build and facilitate the infrastructure and modernization programs that we so desperately need in our country so that we can maintain our competitive edge in the global economy, if that's what we're really worried about. But I would argue that it's more important to maintain a competitive edge in our own economy within our own population. Let's modernize our country because it's time and it's necessary and it makes our lives easier, not so we can be more competitive with China. That's just a bonus if that's how you want to look at it. So I went on a small little rant there, but let's hear what happens next. Call on the blonde lady. She looks like she's ready in school. Oh, is he not taking any questions?
Playing politics with the war.
Oh.
What was that? I asked her, is Prime Minister Netanyahu playing politics with the war?
I don't think so. He's trying to work out a serious problem he has. Thank you.
He's trying to work out a serious problem he has. The problem that he has is genocide, and the solution is to stop committing it. I don't know how else to address that question. Yikes. That's it? Oh, now we're going to hear the reporters.
The East Room, as we see some of the politicians who were flanked behind him. I spotted Representative Greg Stanton, Senator Mark Kelly, Governor Kathy Hochul of New York. So we heard there the president announcing that executive action to partially shut down asylum processing along the U.S.-Mexico border. This is a sweeping move. It will allow U.S. immigration officials to quickly deport migrants who enter the U.S. illegally without processing their asylum claims when border crossings surpass a certain threshold. The president says he's doing this because Republicans refused to do so. He said that that bipartisan border deal was essentially rebuked by Trump, and so he says Republicans bailed out. He says this is, quote, not a political issue that should be weaponized. I want to go ahead and bring in Samantha Vinograd again. She's a CBS News national security contributor and the former Assistant Secretary of Counterterrorism and Threat Prevention for the Department of Homeland Security.
Wow.
So
that's
just first off, can you outline for us what this executive action will do?
Certainly. This executive action is intended to deter individuals from making the incredibly perilous and dangerous journey up to our southern border, whether a land border or coastal border, to try to cross unlawfully. This executive order, which is intended to go into effect at 12:01 a.m. this morning, would deem individuals encountered between ports of entry ineligible for asylum processing. This executive order will remain in effect until irregular migrant encounters go below 2,500 individuals for the span of a week. The goal, again, is to direct individuals to the ports of entry for lawful processing and really to allow the system to even out because it has been so over capacity for so long.
The president says this is really only the beginning. He wants to.
All right. I'm going to read what you had to say. The Obama-Biden administration did exactly what I said. They used any petty crime as an excuse to deport people. For example, there was a lady that got deported because she had a criminal record. Her crime was being an unlicensed street vendor. Sorry for the delayed reply, so on and so forth. Yes, no, I appreciate that. And that was exactly the point that I was making. Because I would be denied asylum. I don't know how many people have speeding tickets or parking violations in America, but that would mean each and every single one of us would be denied entry into our own country because of something that ridiculous. Now, conversely, somebody like Trump with 34 felony convictions absolutely should be denied. That's not the kind of people that we want in this country. That I could understand the safety concerns there. I did not mean to cut off this news anchor.
Do more. He says we need 1,500 more Border Patrol officers, 4,300 more asylum officers. From what you're hearing with their sources at DHS, are they echoing that they just need more help?
They certainly need more help. From an operational perspective, having worked extremely closely with Commissioner Troy Miller and others at CBP and at ICE, it is a fact that there just are not enough CBP and ICE agents at our southern border to handle the number and makeup of individuals who are appearing at our ports of entry and between our ports of entry. And that's why there was bipartisan agreement to increase resources for CBP and for ICE in the legislation that Trump really put an end to. So there is certainly agreement that from an operational perspective, we are over capacity, and that by deeming individuals ineligible for asylum.
That's a very interesting graph. That's a very interesting graph. A very telling graph, if you will, too. Because the border crisis has been a crisis for as long as Republicans and Democrats had an excuse to fight with each other, right? Because obviously the Obama administration, as Oshun so handily described, did the same thing. They would just deport people on the stupidest of whims, the silliest of whims. And it was actually, I believe, I could be mistaken, but I am fairly certain I'm correct. It was actually Bill Clinton himself who established the deportation process and the separation of children from their families. Obviously, there was a deportation process. What I mean is to the egregiousness of questioning the humanity of it, that was established by Bill Clinton. So, historically speaking, there have been encounters, not insignificant numbers, obviously. This looks like, I guess, is it trying to say that this is April 2014, April 2015, and so on and so forth? Or is this as of April 2024? If we choose to look at this as a snapshot in the month of April, still pretty obvious how detrimental recent U.S. foreign policy has been. Obviously, COVID was one of the least encountered times in this border crisis. Not the least, but one of the least. And that's for obvious reasons, right? Everybody was sick. Everybody was afraid. Nobody was trying to risk nothing. But then our foreign policy started getting out of hand, and we started meddling in South American and Latin American affairs. And of course, the Middle East continues to be completely disrupted. Now it's not necessarily Iraq and Afghanistan. Now it's Palestine and Israel. Oh, wait, except it's going back to being ISIS. Oh, wait, now it's going back to being Al-Qaeda. So we're having all these crises happening globally because of U.S. foreign policy, interventionism, and, well, outright imperialism. I don't quite remember the specific historical event that happened in 2019, but it's telling that there was a spike. Something happened in 2019. I guarantee if we looked up what did the United States do in South America in 2019, it was probably something to do with lithium or Brazil or something along those lines. So the fact that these 21, 22, 23, 24 years are showing such high numbers is just a result of U.S. foreign policy. And this is something that is just not discussed. It's, again, we have this problem in America of pointing fingers at things and dictating that these are isolated events without any other context behind them. Because sure, oh my goodness, we're being overran. Why though? People don't just leave their country for no damn reason. It just doesn't happen. There is a reason why the numbers are that high. And there's a reason why they were so low in the past. Right, it could have been the Venezuelan coup, attempted coup, which was backed by whomst? The United States. So, telling graph.
Processing in between ports of entry, we can free up capacity for CBP and for others to engage more efficiently at the ports of entry and through lawful pathways more generally.
Now, Republicans are saying that this is basically a ploy for votes. We're in an election year. They're questioning why now.
I agree with that.
The president did answer the why now in terms of the fact that he's doing this because that bipartisan deal fell apart, and he says he would have rather have done this with the cooperation from Congress. But are your sources understanding of that argument? They say they understand why now.
Well, they believe that my sources are indicating that the why now is because the system is just so strained, and that people that are seeking to come here lawfully through ports of entry, through other lawful means, need to be the focus. The administration is also just very concerned about the health and safety of individuals who are frankly being swindled by human smugglers, by coyotes in the Western Hemisphere, and making an incredibly perilous journey up to the southern border because.
So that's the thing, right? Before we dive into that, let's dive into the history here. On April 30th, 2019, during the Venezuelan presidential crisis, a group of several dozen military personnel and civilians joined Juan Guaido in his call for the removal of Nicolas Maduro as part of what he labeled Operation Freedom. So there we have it. And I'm sure there was some sort of U.S. influence involved there. But to the point on this discussion, right, in the chart, it showed right there, right, it showed the massive spike in 2019. And of course, in March, April, and May, we were at the 129, 137, 118 mark. So this was clearly just snapshots in time for that particular month, which, again, would explain these. There was a coup in Bolivia, right? So South America just was getting coup d'etat left, right, and center. So of course there's going to be spikes in border encounters. But here's the thing that gets me, right? We don't have the personnel to process migrants, but we have the personnel to arrest 129,000 people in a single month, 137,000 people in 1 month, 118,000 people in 1 month. Something just isn't something if we're looking at the numbers as we are being presented them.
Because of misinformation from these cartels and from others, and that we have just reached such a critical moment in our immigration challenge that the moment is now. Now, I do think that they remain hopeful that Congress will act to secure resources for the Department of Homeland Security that are desperately needed to process individuals lawfully. As the president mentioned in his remarks, there are thousands of more agents that are needed, hundreds, if not thousands, of more judges and asylum officers. So I do believe that they'll remain focused on trying to obtain those resources, Lindsay.
You mentioned the smugglers. Do you get a sense that this executive action will put a dent in that? We know that, for as long as we can remember, they've been profiting off of misinformation and fear mongering. Do we get a sense that this might actually alleviate people being taken advantage of?
I think it's certainly going to take time. So in my experience at DHS, when there were misinformation narratives circulating about irregular immigration that the administration thought were putting individuals' lives at risk, there were efforts to try to provide factual information through trusted sources that would resonate on the ground to try to share factual information. And I do expect that the administration will be working with third countries, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Colombia, Mexico, and others to try to push out the factual information that individuals will be ineligible for asylum processing if encountered between the ports of entry, at least for the next week, and going forward if irregular migrant encounters go above 1,500 encounters over a 5-day span. So I think the partnerships with other countries is going to be key here. And I will note, Lindsay, that the president did mention the president of Mexico and the cooperation between our two countries, which has been decisive in leading to lower encounter numbers during 2024. In the month of May, there was a 54% drop in the first 3 weeks of May versus encounter numbers in December, and that's in large part because of work done between the United States and Mexico.
All right. I didn't want to cut her off in the middle of that because she was making some very important points and is actually opening the door to a lot of good discussion. When we talk about the border crisis, we often don't talk about the countries that these people are fleeing from. I've been talking about that, of course. U.S. foreign policy, interventionism. Why are these countries engaging in these crises in the first place? We've had 2 coups in 2019. We have, billionaires. I don't remember what year it was, but I remember distinctly that Elon Musk himself said, we'll coup whoever we want. And that was, I believe, during the Brazil lithium, whatever that was. And so U.S. foreign policy, U.S. interests, private interests at that, are absolutely responsible for these crises. So yeah, okay, on the one hand, we do need to ensure that there's cooperation between governments and communication between citizens. Like, hey, if you're gonna flee our country because of, U.S. foreign policy or billionaire development in our country, be sure to do it lawfully. Otherwise, they will shoot you, detain you, send you back one way or another. Something will prevent you from achieving that. Whereas before the rhetoric was, well, just leave if you don't like it, and then go to America and things will be better, and then come back with American money and make our country great again. That's the rhetoric. That's obviously not what happens. And so it's kind of disingenuous to put the onus on these victim nation states. And so again, we saw how that Border Patrol agent armed was approaching the migrants. Yes, fine. The migrants were trying to tear down the chain or the razor wire and the chain link fence. I get that. I do. I truly get that. They are trying to physically enter a space that is very clearly not entry. But what is the result? The guy is armed and he's threatening them by his approach with his presence. I've been trained in counter... I would say counterterrorism, but I wanted to put it a little bit better. I was, in fact, a gate guard. That, for lack of a better word, I did have to patrol an area. I did have to protect an area, and I was armed and I was trained. And one of the things that you're not supposed to do is threaten civilians. Part of the Geneva Conventions, but also part of the UCMJ. And there was one incident where I did have to communicate with a foreign national, and I myself made the mistake of forgetting that my weapon, although at port arms, and I was resting my hand on top of the butt of the weapon, I could have, to make the interaction a lot less stressful for them, could have put it behind me, which I did once I realized they were scared shitless. Because here's this 6 foot tall, armed, young military member who could be, for all they know, going off the rails in 2 seconds if they don't like what they hear. So I learned a little bit of SaSeshen's, onegaishimasu, boom, right? And I ended up resolving the issue without being threatening, without being intimidating, because that is what we were trained. That is the standard that we are upheld to in the United States Air Force, and of course the Department of Defense in general. Yet Border Patrol seems to not be held to the same standards. In fact, during the Trump administration, they had Facebook groups threatening to rape, murder, and otherwise harm AOC and other women of color in elected office. So I personally don't believe generating more of those people and putting them in those circumstances is going to be beneficial in any form or fashion. And I believe, Oshun, before you disappeared off of the chat there, I apologize, Bolivia. Yes. So it was Bolivia with the lithium fields and all that fun stuff. Carrying on, though.
Do you expect this will be challenged?
I think it's already been challenged. I think that Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders, and the ACLU have already indicated that they will either challenge this in the courts or have expressed deep concern. So I would imagine that those cases are being filed as we speak if they haven't already. I do want to note that the authority that President Biden is using to implement this executive order, Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, was utilized by President Trump former President Trump during his presidency. It was challenged in court, and ultimately it did go into effect. So there is a historical precedent for the president using 212F.
Which, let me chew on that while I read what you have to say real quick. We also have the State Department interfering in domestic policy in those countries. They interfere so that they don't raise the minimum wage when the government tries to pass environmental protection, or just when they want to protect their natural resources from U.S. corporations paying them at unfair prices, etc. If the government doesn't comply, they back a coup by the opposition. And again, this isn't, for anybody who's watching or will be watching, This isn't just arbitrary speculation. The CIA themselves release documents every 10 years, every so often, literally admitting to doing this. And we have the internet now. We have social media. It does not. This isn't something that is difficult to research, verify, and validate. Just like with the Palestinian massacre and the genocide that is currently happening there, it has been broadcast live by both the IDF and Palestinians and the journalists that were or had been there at the time. We are seeing these atrocities happen in real time. We have the evidence of the historical context between the U.S. and Israeli relations, Western European powers and Israeli relations. We are seeing this happen. We are verifying it with our own two eyes in real time. And so with the involvement of the internet, right, we can truly validate that this is exactly what is happening. So please do not take this at face value. Don't question it, but do the research. Actually look this up. And by all means, if you go to a Wikipedia article, don't take Wikipedia at face value. Go to the very bottom of that page and look up all the bibliography references and verify those, right? That is the thing that we lack. That's why misinformation is so prevalent in the United States and in general with the advent of the internet, is because we have lost the ability or the desire or the will or the methodology to do real research, because we just rely on the fact that we put number and word into the fancy machine and it give us answer, right? It's called the Google effect. That's also an issue that has been documented and verified. So just a whole lot to unpack in general. And I said I was going to chew over what was being said here, but chess. I can't even see anything left in Biden's administration. Democrats are right-wing as much as Republicans. You are 100% correct. And in fact, in 2017, I ran for DNC chair. And I specifically argued against the Democratic policies and positions of ignoring rural Americans, but capitulating to Republican policy in the first place. It is such a underhanded tactic and completely disregarding the reality that there are leftists in the South. There are liberals in Texas, in Alabama, in Arkansas, in Florida, but they are just being outright ignored because it isn't advantageous or cheap, I guess, to advertise the Democratic presence in those areas. Then we're getting into gerrymandering, and then we're getting into the real truth about the lesser of two evils and how power, as it continues to concentrate, will become more authoritarian. Doesn't matter what the policy platform is, it's the action and the activity. And as we're seeing here, a crackdown on immigration is authoritarian. Rather than addressing the humanitarian crisis, we're addressing it from the lens of a military and security action, which is conservative and which only has one ultimate end result, which is closing the border. That is where this is going to lead to. And then it'll be violent defense of that border, which it has already led to, which is why vigilantism at our border is also a crisis that is never once talked about. But thank you for bringing that up, Chess. You are 100% correct. I'm going to have to replay whatever it was she said there because I have now forgotten.
Have expressed deep concern, so I would imagine that those cases are being...
The ACLU and the fact that Donald Trump, during his administration, had passed his own executive orders and then set the precedent to allow this executive order to be set. I have said it before, and I will address that in 2 seconds. I have said it before, but the fact that Trump's administration has been allowed to remain intact, and the precedents that were set during that administration were not challenged and were not repealed or anything, is setting even greater dangerous precedent for any other administration in the future. Why? Because what Trump did was mostly authoritarian, mostly for his own benefit. Nepotism abounds, right? Self-serving behaviors. And since those haven't been struck or rescinded or anything else, that means other presidents in the future, such as Biden, can take advantage of those precedents, which is, of course, setting in of itself a dangerous precedent. So chess. A left-wing party on its own would be a good idea to end this dichotomy between Democrats and Republicans. A third party would bring some new grounds in the American political spectrum. I do not disagree. Let me be clear. I do not disagree with what you said. However, the reality is we do have third parties. We have the Green Party. We have the Libertarian Party, although that isn't left-wing. We do have the Socialist Party. We even have a Communist Party. We also have a Pirate Party. I didn't know if you knew that. We have third parties. What we don't have is powerful third parties. And the reason for that, I can tell you from my own personal experience. The Green Party approached me to run for Senate in the in Ohio, the United States Senate in Ohio. And I told them, I was like, listen, I have no qualms about running as a Green Party, but I don't have the resources or the personnel or the infrastructure to run the campaign on my own. I need your help. And so the state party voted, and they voted to support me, and nothing ever came of it because the Green Party infrastructure is decentralized and their resources are extremely limited. And so when you have third parties, but without the financial backing or infrastructure to be effective, they're just existing. And that is ultimately the problem. The second issue is, again, I can speak specifically for the state of Ohio, is that in order to run as an independent in Ohio for, say, Congress, you have to get signatures based on the total governor vote, so voter turnout, which tends to be significantly higher than the 50 signature requirement for a Republican or the 25 signature requirement for a minor party. So at least in the state of Ohio, if the Green Party were there, you could get your 25 signatures and get on the ballot. But there's the second problem, the crux. In order to remain on or be eligible to be on the ballot in the state of Ohio, you have to get at least 2% of the vote. I believe it's only 2%. In order to be placed onto the ballot, as in to be recognized by the state of Ohio, you have to have at least 10% of the vote, or a petition of at least 10% of registered voters. It's one of those two things. Again, please fact check that. It's been a second since I had to look that up. The last time I was in a position to run for office was in 2020, I believe. Regardless, those numbers are egregious, right? There's, 8 million people, 11 million people in Ohio, and of them, let's just say 75% can vote. And then of that 75%, you need 10% of them to back your tiny party, your minor party that isn't Republican or Democrat. So to your point, Chess, which I know it's disappeared from the chat. I don't want to mess with it because I'll probably break it. But to your point, I wish we had a third party. Thank you. Yes, thank you. To your point, a left-wing party on its own would be a good idea. A third party would bring some new grounds to the American political spectrum. The reason why it doesn't happen and the reason why it is so difficult for it to happen, Chess, is because, like Ohio, there are significant amounts of other states, I would say a major majority, a supermajority, if you will, have similar provisions in place. And therefore, it is difficult for these other political parties to even form in those states, let alone field candidates. Which brings up other problems, such as election reform. Why do we still have Citizens United? Money is free speech. That's the biggest problem. Because at least if we eliminated money from the equation, then regular people would have a greater opportunity to be seen and to be heard. But you still run the problem of the discrimination, really, of the major party system preventing competition of any kind, which in of itself should violate antitrust laws by de facto, right? Just by definition. Except I don't believe antitrust laws can impact nonprofit organizations, which is the other gimmick. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party are 501c4 organizations. They are private organizations, but they are nonprofit organizations, which means the law affects them differently. And of course, we're talking about election law. We're talking about a whole myriad mess of other things. So the only way to truly get democracy in our country is to pass laws that would facilitate it. And the only way that's going to happen is to support candidates who want to pass those kinds of laws or who believe in those kinds of laws. But that isn't as easy as people make it out to be. And unfortunately, the reality, and this is something I said in 2017, you're going to have to run in the way that you can run. Meaning, in the state of Ohio, you got a choice, Democrat or Republican. Based on your district, you're going to have to run as a Democrat. Depending on your district, you have no choice but to run as a Republican, regardless of your personal values and beliefs, policies, and platform. You can be as pro-choice as pro-choice can get, right? Kill them at 100 months outside of the womb, right? Pro-choice. You could be that level of extreme left. You could be at the far right extreme of everybody should have guns without any sort of regulation. I don't care if you can't put two sentences together. And you would have to run as a Democrat in Columbus, Ohio, and you'd have to run as a Republican in Springboro, Ohio. That's the reality. Dems the ropes. And I am contemplating creating a course, like a free course, maybe on Udemy. I don't really know yet. Then I'd have to charge. I will preface all of this by saying if I do end up charging, it won't be to act as a gatekeeper, but as to establish putting my money that would be generated from those courses directly where my mouth is and reestablishing the Hello Voter app, which was an app that would help facilitate canvassing, as well as in an app form accomplish the goals of myreps.datamade.us. So it integrated the API as into an app. It also then allowed you to take that data and create canvassing options. Like you could go door to door, drop a pin, and color code it based on your interactions while also maintaining polling questions. Point is, long story short, if I end up doing that, that would be the reason why I would monetize it, is to facilitate the development of that app and being able to maintain it again. It fell off around 2020, unfortunately. So that is content that will be developed one way or the other. There are already in the links in my channel ways to contact your reps. If you click on either of those two panels, I always forget what I name them because reasons. Reasons. Sorry, did not mean to double echo myself there. Contact your rep panel and the script for your rep panel. There are videos on both my SaSeshen's channel and at Ronan for Progress channel that will be going into the nitty-gritty on how to do that, as well as the links to the information themselves. You utilize the myrep.datamade.us to find who your rep is. And then when you find who your rep is, you use the link on how to craft a message to send your message. And I'll be also creating videos on how to research existing bills and how to integrate that information into your policy. This boring 5-10 minutes of talking on Twitch, which is primarily an entertainment social media streaming platform, has a purpose. And I am working on making it more entertaining. I'm working on making it more digestible. Working on it. Give me some time here, right? Like my tism and everything else sometimes gets in the way, and then I get into Professor Ronan mode, right? The reality, though, is it's an uphill struggle. I'm not going to lie to you. It is an uphill struggle. Why? Because we have to do all the work, right? All they have to do, the Trumps, the Bidens, and the everyone else is in between, all they have to do is sit back and relax because they've already done the work decades, centuries ago, depending on how you want to look at American history. So they already know that they are in charge, that they have the power, that they have the control and the authority. They don't have to lift a damn finger to maintain it. They just have to ensure that we don't get smart and pick up the tools and resources, the knowledge, and the actions to challenge it, which is why our anti-war movements, our student protest movements, and our labor movements have been crushed in this country because they did have a chance to succeed. They did have a chance to change the status quo. So As a famous some person said, it is much easier to destroy than it is to create. And I am choosing to embark on that hero's journey with all of you. Join my party and let's slay the dragon, rescue the princess, on building a better nation. Not build back better, not hope and change. Taking ownership, taking back our rights, our future, and our destiny in our hands so that it can never be taken or threatened again. Now, Oshun, I know you said something and it disappeared again. So let me read it. The reason why our system is difficult to change is because the two parties control the system. So yeah, no, we covered that. Rooting for their team, and as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Oh, it's back up again. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. And I mean, I screenshot that, folks. Like, that is the truth. And it goes into the reason why fascism happens. Literally, it literally describes this right there is why fascism happens. It's the reason why this border crisis is being allowed to be the way that it is, and why people are dismissing it. Now, Vifro, yeah, okay, so you're just agreeing with Oshun. Absolutely. And it is true. Personal relationships in the workplace. And I need to dig out that CIA document that basically discusses how to undermine organizations. I think I saved it, actually. But I don't remember where. Which, of course, doesn't help at the very moment as we try to talk about it. But I do remember seeing it and finding it. I believe it's something that you can easily find on the internet. CIA handbook to undermining foreign or Russian operatives or something like that. CIA handbook, I think, is what you have to Google, and you'll find it. I don't want to spend too much time of our stream working on that. So, to the point, yeah, things are the way that they are because of the people that are in power. And the reason why things haven't changed is because it is difficult to change them, because it requires us to work collectively. Which is why the major social movements in our country were such a big deal. The labor movement in the 1900s, or the late 1800s into the 1920s, when unions were formed, was a huge freaking deal. And it was bloody. It was a massacre. The United States National Guard murdered citizens for having the audacity to unionize and demanding that their employers treated them with anything resembling human decency. So we not only have a history of genocide, enslavement, and so on and so forth, but murdering workers for demanding the crazy things like a fair wage, fair working hours, and, I don't know, not forcing children to work in the coal mines, right? People died for those rights. The 40-hour work week, OSHA, child labor laws, safety regulations in the workplace, the minimum wage. These were all things that people fought and died for in the United States of America. So it is not an understatement to say that through words or through blows is what it takes for things to change in America. And unfortunately, the history is more leaning towards the blows. Now, I'm not going to sit here on Twitch and say we need to overthrow our government with violent retribution. I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to encourage that. What I am going to say is that if we want a peaceful resolution to these problems, we're going to have to get off our asses and start doing it. And there are tools and resources readily available, and I intend to provide as many of them as I can in the most accessible way I can. Some of it might end up being monetized, such as running for office, because that's not for everybody. And it's going to be an affordable tool. I'm not going to charge $3,000 to run for school board. That's stupid. It'll probably be the lowest amount of money that I can charge on Udemy, which is $19.99. And if it's on sale, it'll be for $10. And in that course, I will outline exactly what you need to run for office, what it takes, how to research it for your local, county, state, or federal levels, and the kind of budgets you should expect, when and why you should choose to run for one party or another, when you should primary someone, and the requirements to run for various offices generally, broadly, and then, of course, how to research them. And the only reason why I would want to monetize that is so I can facilitate other tools, because unfortunately, I am not independently wealthy. And if I were, believe you me, we would be having this stream, but from a slightly nicer, better air-conditioned room. And, well, we would be getting a lot more accomplished with civic engagement. So for now, we're building towards it. We are building that infrastructure. We are building that community. So if nothing else, I do encourage you to share my stream, follow the stream, the channel, if you will. Sign up for the YouTube channels, SaSeshen and Ronan for Progress. Subscribe to those. You do not have to sub to this channel. In fact, it would be better if you just donated to the campaign page outright. I would actually get 100% of the money minus credit card fees rather than half. Regardless, spread the message that there are tools and resources available, especially because if you're on this channel, it's because you searched for politics, or you searched for leftist, or you searched for Palestine, which means fundamentally you are an empathic person who sees the way the country is and has a problem with that. And understandably so. You want to make a difference and you want to make changes. And chances are you have a circle that wants to do the same thing. And the likelihood is that you don't know what the first step is to take. Or if you have an idea of what you want to do, you may not know how to necessarily execute it. You may not know how to find the answers. So please share this stream. Subscribe to the YouTube channels. Not so I can be a popular streamer like Hasanabi, but so that we can start having those conversations, so that the tools can start being passed around and shared, and we can start fighting back. Let's get that little bit of a snowball rolling downhill. That is the purpose of this stream. It's not to get rich, not to get famous. That would be a happy coincidence, but the goal is to establish a true, functioning, well-organized infrastructure for civic engagement. Now then, I need a cold beverage. And I think we are doing a very good job here. I don't think we actually need to transition into a game at this point. I think we're having some good interactions, and I think the content for today, the news, is just really good talking points that I don't think we need to water it down with something playing in the background. I think this is actually solid. So we're going to continue with this format. But we're going to take a quick break because it's been an hour and a half, and by all means, we all need to stretch, grab a water, what have you. All right. So be right back, and we will carry on with her name isn't there, but with this correspondent. And we're back. Sorry about that. Hopefully everybody had a chance to grab some water, grab a snack, go to the restroom, and we will just get right into it.
That on this executive order, the administration is expecting politics to come into play on both sides of the political spectrum. Republicans are already coming out and criticizing it, and Democrats are also expected to criticize it for what they perceive to be bans on asylum processing. And that's where the administration is focused on pointing out that they are not banning asylum processing writ large. 212F is not being used in a blanket fashion across our southern border. Instead, it is being used between ports of entry, and that asylum processing at ports of entry will remain in effect. However, Secretary Mayorkas is typically the brunt of political criticism on many issues, primarily on the immigration front. So I'm sure he's, buckling his seatbelt and getting ready for a bumpy ride ahead.
So, to that point, I think what we're going to hear from the remaining of this interview or this discussion is more of the same, right? The nitty gritty. But she did bring up a valid point, is that the Republicans are up in arms about this, and I do want to have that conversation. And in fact, from the Forbes channel, which was, of course, not in charge of the discussion, but that was broadcasting it, we have this interview, discourse, I should say. So Senate Republicans hold press briefing. That's what we're about to hear. While they're getting ready to speak, I'm going to set up a poll for us.
Well, good morning, everybody. We're here to talk about the president's latest executive order on the border. By my count, he's issued 94 executive orders since he's been president of the United States. But he's waited until today to actually do what he calls effective action to secure the border. And my question to him is, why did you wait until now if you were serious about doing it? The simple answer is he's not serious about securing the border. We had some discussion about whether or not new laws were required to be passed. There were some negotiations on a potential border bill that was not successful. But the simple fact of the matter is that the same laws that were in effect back when President Trump was in office are still in effect. But the difference is the unwillingness of this White House and this administration simply to enforce the law. And the numbers.
So I always love when Republicans talk about the law. This person's not enforcing the law. They're just acting above the law. Meanwhile, which political party prevented the Obama administration from nominating and affirming Supreme Court justices for 9 months? Which political party undermined healthcare reform? Which political party can literally when I was active duty in the United States Air Force, it was October 2013. The government shut down. I was in the unit deployment office, and I had literally just sent one of our units over to the sandbox. I don't necessarily think any of them were in a combat situation, but I was privy to that kind of discourse, if you will. And the government shut down entirely, meaning we still had boots on the ground, people fighting in the war on terror in the Middle East, laying down their lives, suffering casualties every single day. The government shut down because Ted Cruz and the Tea Party did not want to support the Obama administration improving healthcare access to the American people, which is ultimately how we ended up getting Obamacare. But that was my original call to arms, my waking moment that, you know what? I want to serve my country, but this is clearly not doing it if we can just be put to the wayside on the whims of a senator. So to simply, to say that outright is just false, and it's disingenuous at best that this administration is flouting the law while their party literally violates the law, literally has more prosecutions and felony charges across every level of government. My own hometown suffered a scandal from the Republican mayor who got elected. He and his wife were caught embezzling millions of dollars. That isn't to say that Democrats aren't corrupt in places and causing mischief and mayhem. But let's keep the rhetoric, on the level, shall we?
Numbers of people coming across have just been unprecedented, along with the drugs that are.
I mean, we've hit this part home, but it's just, again, this is their talking point. We're going to be tough on the border because these numbers are unprecedented. Why are they unprecedented? Nobody's talking about it. Not Biden, not the Democrats, not the Republicans, not Trump. They're just using it as political fencing tools.
Have come across that have taken the lives of 108,000 Americans, including 71,000 due to fentanyl, the leading cause of death among 18 to 45-year-olds. And then
Okay. Let's see. Fentanyl as a result of illegal immigration. I guess that's going to be how we're going to have to look for this. Fentanyl as a result flowed to the United States, DEA.gov, executive summary. It looks like it's actually coming from China. Yowza. Wasn't expecting that, to be perfectly honest. It's actually coming from China more than it is coming to anything else. But what's more important is that fentanyl used to be used in pharmaceuticals to deal with, you guessed it, pain relief. There was a movie on Netflix, don't remember what it was called, that went into this. And that scandal blew up in 2012 as well, where they were using fentanyl to treat pain. And I think even depression to a greater or lesser degree, which led to the heroin crisis, the opioid crisis in our country, which is clearly ongoing to this very day. So again, this is the part that gets me. Fact checking in general is not difficult if you know what to search for, and I really didn't know what to search for. And we can argue that the DEA, a government agency, well, you can't trust the government. Of course, the government's going to say what it makes it sound good. But, I'm just saying, between the DEA's information and, let's see, you got the immigrationforum.org, the Office of the Texas Governor, you got NBC, Congress.gov, Washington Post, ICE, a lot of government organizations, WOLA. All of these are the top responses from this, and they're going to tell you the same thing, that it's coming from China. What they're not going to tell you is that it was already in America. It's a industrial chemical that is used in America, and it was part of our healthcare system through prescription drugs to treat pain, among other things. So it is not only disingenuous, it is misinformation. It is misleading to say that this is purely immigration at our border and not, our other ports of entry that have nothing to do with the southern border.
There's the 400,000 unaccompanied children that have been placed with sponsors in the United States and simply lost by the Biden administration.
Also disingenuous because that happened in the Trump administration to a much greater degree. In fact, one of the greatest atrocities that has happened in our country in recent times was the fact that when we were separating the children from their parents at our border and putting them in cages, we were also putting those children who had living parents, whose only crime was existing outside of the United States and dealing with U.S. foreign policy, those children were put into the foster care system and then lost. And perhaps it's still ongoing today. Wouldn't shock me. But we are literally, the United States of America, our federal government, is literally responsible for human trafficking. And the fact that like that's not even like a blip in the news is ridiculous, and the fact that they're just blatantly using it as a talking point is egregious to me. It is egregious. To freeze. I want to make sure I get your name right there. I guess I can't move my poll around while I'm trying to look. Of course, it's in purple font, so I can't even see what it says. I'm sorry. Vifro. Sorry. To your point that you were trying to make is that there. Oh no, that must have been chess. Anyway, somebody was making the point that there is a lot of problems in our country that needs to be resolved, and if we could just organize, we could actually start doing something about it, and that's true. It's just at this point in our nation's history, it's like there's so many problems. Where do you even begin? Which thread do you start pulling on? Personally, I would like to deal with the humanitarian crises first, such as the corruption, such as charging each and every single congressman, senator, governor, state legislator, mayor, CEO, board, police officer, judge, prosecutor, and anybody else with power and authority with aiding and abetting genocide who have, at any point in time, supported the Israeli actions in Palestine. That would be a humongous resolution to the corruption in our country. But, carrying on.
Can't tell you whether these children are going to school, getting the health care they need, whether they're being trafficked for sex or forced into labor, as the New York Times investigative piece months ago disclosed. So they simply don't know, and frankly, they just don't care. And now we read, according to the New York Post, that all the asylum claims that have been stacked up in our immigration courts, that the Biden administration plans to simply dismiss approximately 350,000 of those cases. So they've opened the front door, and when the room gets too crowded, they open the back door. And it is a shell game. It is a shell game. They are not serious about it. This is a conversion based on the proximity of the next election and sinking poll numbers, and we think it deserves to be called out for what it is. So
I'm a little confused to the point. He's dismissing them. He's not just outright granting them. So how is it opening up a back door? He would be opening the front door again and telling people to get out. Whatever.
Senator Graham.
So our friends in Texas and along the border, we definitely feel your pain. I talked to President Trump this morning, and he says this is a scam and people will see through it. I think he's dead right. If you want the border secured and you're waiting on this group to do it, you're going to die waiting. So the policy, as I understand it, is going to be an economic boom for the cartels. This is literally some of the best things that could happen for the business of illegal immigration, because there's going to be a cap where you kind of shut it down every day. So if you're a cartel, you're going to rack and stack them. You're going to find out exactly how many can get through a day. And you say, who would like to pay more to move up to the line? The biggest beneficiary of this policy is going to be human trafficking cartels who will charge more to get in the group that's going to go through. And at the end of the day, you'll have to wait longer and pay more, but you're coming in.
I don't like the way he's approaching it, but he brings up a valid concern. By establishing a quota, that is already a problem, right? Like, we already can't, as a country, like the United States federal government already cannot maintain the influx of migrants as it is. Now you're going to put a hard number on that quota. Yeah, you will exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. I don't want to agree with him, and I certainly don't like the way he smugly presented it, but he's not wrong. That is actually a very real concern.
And if you want to stop the flow, here's what President Trump said he will do on day one. They will keep coming until they see people leaving. He told me this morning, when he gets to be president, not only is he going to secure the border, he's going to deport hundreds of thousands of people here illegally. And if you want to shut down illegal immigration, those coming need to see an outflow by the tens and hundreds of thousands. That will deter.
I mean, at what point, like, again, this is the slippery slope, right? This is literally what kind of rhetoric was used. You know what? Let's not even go back to history. Let's look at what's happening in Palestine by Israel. Get out of Gaza because you guys have Hamas. Get out of this city because there's Hamas. Get out of this city because there's Hamas. Go to Rafah. Oh, we're going to start bombing this part of Rafah because there's Hamas. And we're going to continue bombing every part of Rafah until Hamas is eradicated. But keep going over here, keep going over here, keep going over here. We are seeing this play out in real time, a few steps down the road, happening in Gaza right now. Let's go ahead and just deport hundreds of thousands of people. By the way, illegal immigration, illegals, contribute to those very same economies from those very same states that hate them without taking any of the benefits because they are ineligible for them. Do you know what it takes to file for food stamps or any sort of government support? A social security number. That's what it takes. And if you don't got one, you ain't getting any. And so you're going to try and deport 11 million or so people from the country. The workforce is 150 million, 155. That's the workforce in America. You're going to deport nearly 10% of the workforce, which I get it. 11 million undocumented migrants is not part of that calculation. But you would effectively be displacing the equivalent of 10% of the workforce to make a statement, which is only going to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis. You're going to deport them, and then they're going to come right back. And then what? You're going to beef up the security on the patrol. You're going to deputize civilians. And what's going to start happening? Violence, massacres, slaughter. No, that's just not okay. Like that is very dangerous rhetoric. I'm pretty sure Biden has deported as many people as Trump, probably. And also, why does Trump need another term in order to fulfill campaign promises from 2016? Well, why does any president need a second term to fulfill promises? Especially since in their second term, they become a lame duck and therefore not as influential. We saw that in the Obama administration. Technically, we saw that in the Bush administration as well.
The only policy change that will work is to have mass deportations because people will stop coming when they see people leaving.
I would love to see any historical evidence of that. I would be. You show me evidence and proof that actually works, I'll shut up. Show me the proof, the historical evidence that throwing people out prevents them from coming back in or would deter others from coming in. It just means they would find more intelligent or unscrupulous means of entry, which is already the problem with the cartels that you literally just said is the major concern, is that cartel influence and entry into our country. So, it's baffling. It's baffling to me, truly. Who's going to smugly speak now, I wonder? This guy.
Okay, I want you to listen up. Here's the drill. President Biden is in trouble politically.
They tried getting tough on undocumented immigrants in Georgia back in 2010. They ended up with rotting crops because no one wanted to do that work. So, not to say hook, line, and sinker, but as I said, undocumented migrants are around 11 million, and they contribute to the economy. They do. Part of that contribution is doing the work that Americans just really don't want to do. Do you want to pick blueberries in 110-degree weather for 12 hours a day, 6-7 days a week for $3 an hour? I surely don't. I highly doubt any of you do. And it's not because we're beneath that work. It's for the conditions, and the pay ain't worth it. You pay me $500,000 a year to do it. I would work as long as I possibly could to fulfill that $500,000. I probably wouldn't last very long in the fields, but hey, I would give it the old college try. And that's the point, right? So these undocumented migrants contribute significantly more to society than they take away because they don't take anything away. They don't. Granted, now we get into the slippery argument of, well, are you saying we should just grant them all citizenship and a free pass? They came here illegally. Wouldn't you be rewarding them? Or I guess maybe I should be using an arrogant Southern accent, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. Would it be rewarding bad acting to grant some sort of legal status to those that are currently here, whilst denying that opportunity to those that are trying to come here? Furthermore, would it be detrimental to grant a legal status to either side and then address concerns as they pop up? Personally, as someone who does intend to sit here one day, I think we should give legal status to those that are currently here, and we should expedite and streamline the legal status for those that are seeking entry. Again, if the problem is, well, we can't trust that these illegals aren't going to rape, murder, and steal from our children and wives and daughters, great. We assign them a number. I don't like saying that word, not especially in that context, but a social security number, an immigration number, right? We give them documentation, right? Of course, they want to put armbands and worse on them, but the idea is give them a status. And if they're bad actors, guess what? Now they have a legal status. Now they can be prosecuted by our laws without having to be deported. Granted, I think that happens anyway. But not only will they have documentation, i.e. traceability, i.e. a means to follow up on those background checks and so on and so forth, you could grant that status, and then they could move forward into society and start contributing through the America Works program, i.e. developing and improving our infrastructure. It's a win-win-win. Fighting back against the largest potential growth America has seen in decades is ignorance at best. The undocumented immigrants are also keeping Social Security solvent, correct? Because as they pay taxes, not necessarily wage taxes, but through income tax and other spending, they do contribute to Social Security. Let's read this. Undocumented immigrants can help keep Social Security solvent by paying payroll taxes into the system each year, even though they are usually not eligible to receive benefits. Because immigrants are generally younger than the U.S. population, they are less likely to retire in the near future, which can help extend the system's solvency. According to a 2023 report from Social Security system trustees, the more immigrants that enter the country, the longer the system will remain solvent, which also valid. And it goes back to the point that if you want to solve this crisis and address the illegality of the activity, then you would want to make it as legal as possible because it resolves more problems that way than it causes, right? Are there bad actors amongst the migrants from the southern border? Yes. No doubt about it. MS-13, the cartels, they are bad people and they are slipping through the cracks legally or otherwise. No question about that. The overwhelming majority, though, are families. People like you and me who are just trying to survive and make it out of a bad situation that our foreign policy caused. And in the process of doing so, we could be choosing to be humanitarian neighbors or bastards. And right now, we're choosing to be bastards. And it's going to cause more problems than resolve them. And that's what is not being addressed. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't mention that last point you made. Many use fake Social Security numbers to pay payroll taxes, which is interesting. Not recommended, of course. Let's give them a real number, a foreign identification number. Like, again, it's not like we don't have the processes in place, the infrastructure in place. There are a myriad ways to handle this in an ethical and moral way. And it would improve literally all of the things that they are claiming are under attack. It's egregious to me.
He's polling right up there with fungal infections. Part of the reason for that is that he gave in to the loon wing of his party, and he dissolved the southern border. Now, 5 months before an election, he has to appear to be willing to do something about it, hence this executive order. And he expects you to report this epiphany that he has had, take what the White House is telling you, balance it on your noses like trained seals, and report it uncritically. For 3 years, we have watched President Biden push on a door that has been clearly marked full. He's mismanaged Congress, COVID, the national debt, the economy, inflation.
All right, I guess I think we can kind of tell where this is going. Oh, and Ted Cruz is getting in on it. I hate that bastard. He's literally the reason why I left active duty to pursue a career in politics. So you know what, Ted? Let's see if you're going to give me a reason an even gooder reason to justify getting into this office and making your life a living nightmare.
For co-hosting this and invite him to take the podium, and then we'll close it out and send it over.
Look at that face.
Joe Biden
You just want to.
Democrats have presided over a criminal invasion of the United States of America. We are facing the worst illegal immigration our nation has ever seen. 11 million illegal immigrants have come in, invited by the Democrats. When Joe Biden came into office, he inherited the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. All he had to do was nothing. Just sit there and stare at the wall.
Is that true? Let's find out. Did Joe Biden inherit the lowest, what did you say, immigration or illegal immigration? Illegal immigration rate in 45 years. So that's Marco Rubio. Biden is facilitating illegal immigration. Dissecting the Republican narrative about the border. I would love just a unbiased, because that was like a senator's page, a congressman's page. Yikes. Migrationpolicy.org might be a good one to look at. Let's see. So this was written on January 20th, 2021. So again, COVID happened in 2020 during the Trump administration. Joe Biden didn't take office until 2021, right? That's the thing that's often, and I get it's confusing because, the election happens in 2020, right? We vote every 4 years, and we're voting now, 2024. But whoever wins it is only going to take office in 2025. So everything that's happening this year is at the feet of who's currently in office, which is Joe Biden. So with that perspective understood, Ted Cruz just said that he didn't handle COVID correctly. He wasn't president. He literally wasn't the president. Literally was unable to do anything about it. But to your point about the immigration, this statistic, more monthly illegal border crossings from Mexico than before Donald Trump took office, despite 453 miles of new or upgraded barriers along the nearly 2,000 mile line. So this isn't me cherry picking a left wing liberal whatever. Although I guess factcheck.org does have bias. So let's see, the Migration Policy Institute. Let's see. The Biden administration has taken 535 immigration actions over its first 3 years, has already outpaced the 472 immigration-related executive actions undertaken in all 4 years of the Trump administration's. So even the migration policy is saying, no, Biden's been doing more about it. Let's see. Expansion of Title 42, end of Title 42. This isn't specifically talking about 2021, but again, whether you choose to use factcheck.org, migrationpolicy.org, what have you, the numbers are there. They're out there. You can find them. This crisis was building and growing. And we actually saw it in the chart earlier, is that it started becoming a major problem, yes, during the Biden administration. That's when it ballooned out of proportion. True. But it began at the tail end of the Trump administration. So you're giving me reasons to keep going, Ted. Thank you.
But instead, he deliberately broke the system. This chart on the right shows when Biden came into office, you had historic lows the instant he was sworn in. The numbers skyrocketed. It went from the lowest rate in 45 years to today, the highest rate in the history of our nation. This is deliberate. Now today, President Biden and the Democrats have a press conference. And here's what they're announcing. He could have stopped this every single day of his presidency. When he signs this executive order, the only question anyone should ask is, why didn't you do this in 2021? Why didn't you do this in 2022? Why didn't you do this in 2023? Why didn't you do this last month or the month before or the month before? How many dead bodies is enough? You want to understand the consequences? Take a look at the 2 police officers in New York who were shot this week by an illegal alien that Joe Biden and the Democrats released. The assailant, Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, is a name really out of Charles Dickens. Mata is Spanish for he kills. His middle name is a communist murdering dictator. And what happened? He came illegally from Venezuela. He came to John and my home state of Texas. He came to Eagle Pass. We had him apprehended. And what did he do? He did what Joe Biden and the Democrats have done for 3.5 years. He let him go. He let him go. And Mr. Mata went to New York City and shot 2 New York cops this week. That's happening every single week.
I do make it a point to give credit where credit is due, and I'll give Ted Cruz this much credit. He is a fantastic speaker. He really is. He is a fantastic speaker. I cannot fault him for being able to deliver a message and paint a picture. But cherry picking events, again, I agree that there are bad actors out there. I agree that there are some bad mamma-jambas coming through the border, legally or otherwise. And trying to point fingers, that's just like with 9/11. You're Muslim. You're going to the mosque. You're not wearing an American flag, head scarf or whatever. Therefore, you're a bad guy. I can't speak to that. And the cops that were killed in New York, I mean, okay, fine. So that's bad, right? I mean, you shouldn't be killing cops. But at the same time, we have our own police and National Guard in Texas assaulting protesters because they evidently shouldn't be protesting against genocide on school grounds because that's not, I guess, peaceful. So don't tell me that like our cops are this paragon of morality, because they're not. In fact, police killings have already. Let me correct the record here, but how many people have police killed in America 2024? We've got more than 600 people are killed by law enforcement in the U.S. each year. An estimated 250,000 civilian injuries are caused by law enforcement officers annually. 15% of civilians who experience police threat of or use of force during legal interventions are injured. In 1 year, more than 50 million persons in the U.S. have contact with police during a traffic stop, street stop, arrest, traffic accident, or resident-initiated contact. 1 in 6 Americans. 1 in 6. 1 in 6 Americans have to deal with a cop. Where else in the world does that happen? About 1 million of these civilians experience police threat or use of force during these interactions. We can go into the statistics of where those actions are occurring. Racial disparities, non-fatal hospitalizations. I mean, this is from the University of Illinois, Chicago. I missed your thing again. I apologize. Oh, that the Venezuelans are usually right-wingers, yeah. And that's the thing. A lot of the immigrants actually would vote for Republicans in the first place, which is something that is very strikingly shocking, considering how the Republicans view them. But it goes to show that like political ideology has no race. It literally has no bounds. It's people believe this way because they believe this way, regardless of skin color, ethnic background, religious beliefs, cultural background, age, gender, what have you. People believe some of these things, and that's the way that it is. So we could sit here and pick apart Ted Cruz's rhetoric all day long, but
We have not had a week go by when someone is not shot, someone is not murdered, a child is not raped by an illegal immigrant released by Joe Biden and the Democrats. Now, understand what is going on here. This is election year politics. And by the way, we've seen this game before. Apparently the Democrats have one playbook, which is create a crisis, and then a couple of months before the election, do something very mild to address the crisis and say, see, problem solved. We saw this with gas prices. Right before the last election, gas prices had doubled. People were hurting. And what did he do? Right before the election, he releases oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Gas prices fell a little bit.
He wasn't the president. That was Trump.
And they victory lap that they've reduced gas prices a tiny bit from the massive historic highs they've had. We also saw this on student loans. Last election, right before the election, what does Joe Biden do? He says, I'm giving away $1 trillion to young people. By the way,
well, unless he's referring to the 2022 election, in which case, okay, but the way he is making this sound is the previous presidential election cycle, because it's always an election year, right? It's always an election year. So unless he's talking about 2022,
young people come vote for Democrats now. Now, he knew he was lying to them. He knew what he was doing was illegal. He knew the Supreme Court would strike it down, and of course it did. This is the same game. What they are announcing,
which is actually kind of infuriating too. So he did try to forgive some student loan debt, not as much as he should have or promised to do, but the Supreme Court did strike it down. But the PPP loans, those were forgiven. Those weren't struck down, though. One of these things is not like the other. They're both loans. They're both supposed to be paid back. They were both emergency whatevers that were guaranteed by the federal government or what have you. They're still beholden to the banking rules and regulations and blah, 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 blah. PPP loans, forgiven, no questions asked. No tax event occurring either. But student loans, nope, can't be having that. In 2021, a study of over 30 years worth of medical data revealed the number of deaths at the hands of police officers in the US is more than double the amount that's been widely reported. Fantastic. Because the numbers are already over 1,000, and if it's closer to double, that's disgusting. Again, a single murder of a citizen by a police officer is one too many. 2,000, 3,000. Even 100 are way, way too many.
Is they're going to issue an executive order that normalizes illegal immigration at 4,000 people a day. 4,000 people a day is 1.5 million a year. And understand on this chart.
But how is that? What? It doesn't normalize illegal immigration at 4,000 a year. That's how many people we can handle. So.
Here, because what they're doing is unusually cynical. He came in here, the numbers skyrocketed here. 4,000 a day is 120,000. So we're right here. He's proposing to lower it to right here. To lower it just a bit. And then to play the same game he played on gas prices. Say, look at the great victory. And by the way, if God forbid Joe Biden is reelected, the number will go from 120 back up to here. Because this is what they want. The Democrats want that criminal invasion. And the police officers being shot, the young women being murdered, the children being raped. They're unwilling to stand up and protect them. It's immoral, it's wrong, and what the White House is doing today is they're just playing a...
Which is no different than what Joe Biden said is, hey, congressional leaders, Congress and Senate, you had a bipartisan bill to address this problem, and then you tanked it, so now I'm going to use the executive order. It's the same rhetoric. Joe Biden just is a terrible public speaker and does not elicit anything remotely resembling inspiration whatsoever. Ted is at the very least succeeding in riling up his base. They're coming for your wives. They're coming for your children. They're murdering the cops. And if we, the conservatives, the Republican Party, do not take back ownership of our country, if we do not take back control of the White House, if we do not hold these disparaging Democrats accountable for their atrocities and their rising disregard for the rule of law, we will continue to suffer. I can do that stuff too. I can sit here and just have, well, this flag billowing with an American eagle screeching across the background, and I don't have a firearm with me, but here we go. This is firearm looking enough. I will protect our nation as our next president because God and country. I could say all of that in the same way, with the same zeal and the same passion for a more ethical approach. If we do not take care of this humanitarian crisis, we will fall victim to the same cruelty, the same destruction and suffering that we have caused millions of indigenous Americans, millions of slaves who are now freed, who are now generations still suffering from the harm that we have inflicted upon their past. We cannot make these same mistakes, and we cannot allow these tyrants, these would-be warmongers, these people who want to use the suffering, the isolated incidences of cruelty to harden our hearts and to take away our hope and our compassion from our brothers from another country whom our foreign policy have displaced from their ancestral homes. Do you think they have traveled thousands of miles with nothing but the clothes on their back? Their children screaming and starving beside them night after night, mile after mile, day after day, month after month, just so they can be threatened at the border by ceaseless, uncaring, remorseless soldiers armed to the teeth, ready to shed blood for some thought that you might cause them harm. Of course not. Let us do the right thing. The American thing. Let us find a solution that is moral and ethical. I can do this all day, folks. We can have rhetoric. We can have impassioned speeches. We can do all this. But at the end of the day, it's the substance that matters. And this kind of crap is only happening on one side of the aisle. Whomst on the left can do what I just did. Not AOC, not Ian Omar, not Bernie, not anymore. He's capitulated. We don't have inspiring, thought-provoking leaders on the left in the Democratic Party. We do not have people in office who are trying to reach out, not to solve a problem, not to dictate an issue, but to bring people in to work on a problem together for that solution. We just don't have that. We do not have statesmanship. We do not have leaders. We do not have people who are just career politicians in positions of power, leading, representing. We don't have that. And so what we are left for is this demagoguery. And if what is needed is to take clips of this stream and that speech I just gave and then just make that my brand to try and fight back against this, I'm happy to do it. I am happy to take on that ownership, and hopefully one day soon there will be a collective of us that we will have that infrastructure, we will have that resource to all get on the stage. Maybe we aren't all fiery, passionate speakers, but maybe we can all speak from a place of compassion and empathy and morality rather than the rule of destruction and power and authority and enforcement. That is not how a democracy operates. That's how a dictatorship, a fascist regime, an authoritarian regime operates. If you have to put your heel on someone's throat in order to lead, you aren't leading, you are oppressing. And that is what we are seeing here with this speech.
Political gain.
Oh, thank God. All right, Mr. Maybe Mustache. Yeah, that's a mustache. We're done listening to that. I think I got my blood pumping enough now. Pete Aguilar. Who is that? A Democrat from California? Okay. I guess he got put on the spot. Let's see what the Democrats have to say, because they're apparently not happy with it either.
Thank you, Ted. Questions? Max?
With President Biden slated to release his executive order later today on the border, curious your thoughts on the proposal and whether you support the action.
Republicans have shown, time and time again that they are unserious about this issue. And I think that's the most...
I can't even... You know what would be hilarious if this was a satire channel and I wore a red shirt, like a brighter red shirt for the Republican argument, and then like a really bright blue shirt for the Democratic argument, and then literally just said the same exact thing, like read the same exact script both times. The Democrats aren't serious about immigration. Change my shirt. The Republicans aren't serious about immigration. Like, I couldn't... If we were on YouTube, right, and you just happened across my video, and let's just say it was just going viral, right? And you watched it, you'd be like, that's so funny. Republicans are blaming Democrats, and then the Democrats are blaming the Republicans, saying the exact same thing. You'd think, oh, that's funny. That's comedy. That's funny, haha. The pathetic, the absolute horrific reality is it isn't satire. That is literally what we are seeing play out. And
problematic. President Trump tells Senate Republicans to turn back a bipartisan compromise. Speaker Johnson, turns down, the ability to bring something like this to the floor. And that's because Republicans are more concerned about keeping this as a campaign issue than they are about governing and solutions.
Jesus,
the bottom line is House Democrats believe we can and should secure our border while opening up more legal pathways that, by the way, have been the reason why we have had success. And success is defined by 2/3 of unauthorized crossings. That's the reduction. It's been reduced by 2/3 unauthorized crossings at the southern border in the last 6 months. And it's because of a combination of Joe Biden's policies to support enforcement and border patrol and give them the resources and the tools that they need, even when House Republicans voted to cut those budgets, combined with opening up legal pathways for people to come into this country. And that's exactly what the Biden administration has prioritized. But we have to do both. We have to provide opportunities for individuals who have family members who are undocumented to contribute and to be part of the fabric of this country. We think that the American people understand that. Individuals who have been living with someone who is undocumented for 20 years or 30 years, they should have that ability to become citizens and to become lawful permanent residents and to become part of this economy because they are part of the fabric of our communities. And so we need to continue to do both of those strategies, and I'm concerned that this is just the enforcement only side of the strategy. But I'm confident that we can continue to lift up programs like temporary protected status, like support for those with DACA, like helping families who have a loved one who is undocumented.
Well, I might stand slightly corrected because he's a much better public speaker than most of the people that we've seen in the Democratic Party. And he seems to have a pretty reasonable approach to this issue. I'm not going to sit here and stump for Pete Aguilar or anything, but that's a pretty reasonable response. Hey, let's make sure we're not just focusing on the enforcement. And in general, we are focusing on not just enforcement, but also lawful avenues, which is exactly what I said. Of course, my proposals are significantly broader in those avenues and significantly less in the enforcement aspect, to be fair. Happy to have that debate, happy to have that conversation, but it's mind-blowing. It is actually, I'm actually a little disturbed that the same talking points that Pete Aguilar just gave were verbatim, to a T, the exact same talking points that Ted Cruz and the others gave against Joe Biden. That's deeply disturbing that it's the same argument. It's their problem, not ours. It's their fault, not ours. They're not serious about it. We are. Wow. Like, that's the state of American politics, folks. Crikey. What else do we got? Okay, well, this is, we spent a solid 2 hours on this subject. Let's head up to the Merrick Garland confrontation with Matt Gaetz, which, by the way, Matt Gaetz, I thought this guy was already
in which
held accountable for child crimes. Like, I thought he was booted. Apparently he's still in office. And apparently accosting Merrick Garland, who was... No, he wasn't Obama. Merrick Garland was an Obama appointee? I think so. Yeah. Anyway.
Explains that conspiracies about the FBI causing the Capitol insurrection are false and concerning.
Without objection.
And finally, I ask unanimous consent to enter an excerpt from FBI Director Wray's testimony before this committee last July, where he states, quote, "I will say this notion that somehow the violence at the Capitol on January 6th was part of some operation orchestrated by FBI sources and agents is ludicrous, and it's a disservice to our brave, hardworking, dedicated men and women." Close quote.
Without objection. The gentleman before is recognized for 5 minutes.
Attorney General.
So yeah, Attorney General, not Supreme Court Justice. See, you get where I'm going with this, right? Like, here's a man that is literally a living, breathing example of Republican obstructionism flouting the rule of law. goodness.
General, you've told us that it's a dangerous.
Gates was transporting minor girls across state lines, which is definitely illegal. Yeah. That's why I say the state of our politics is a clown show. It is literally like we literally have the worst representation of our country has to offer, representing the American people at home and abroad. So anyway, let's just
Conspiracy theory to allege that the Department of Justice is communicating with these state and local prosecutions against Trump.
He looks like a pedophile.
You can clear it all up for us right now. Will the Department of Justice provide to the committee all documents, all correspondence between the department and Alvin Bragg's office and Fonnie Willis's office and Letitia James's office?
The offices you're referring to are independent offices of state.
I get that. The question is whether or not you will provide all of your documents and correspondence. That's the question. I don't need a history lesson.
Well, I'm going to say again, we do not control those offices. They make their own decisions.
The question is whether you communicate with them, not whether you control them. Do you communicate with them, and will you provide those communications?
If you make a request, we'll refer it to our Office of Legislative Affairs.
But see, here's the thing. You come in here and you lodge this attack that it's a conspiracy theory, that there is coordinated lawfare against Trump. And then when we say, fine, just give us the documents, give us the correspondence, and then if it's a conspiracy theory, that will be evident. But when you say, well, we'll take your request, and then we'll sort of work it through the DOJ's accommodation process, then you're actually advancing the very dangerous conspiracy theory that you're concerned about. Now, you were a judge, once nominated the highest court in our country. When you were a judge, I'm just curious, did you ever make political donations to partisan candidates?
No.
No, and you didn't because that would create the potential appearance of impropriety.
I didn't because there's a federal rule barring federal judges from making contributions.
Right, but under that same theory of attacks on the judicial process, like shouldn't someone be owed like a jury of their peers and a judge that's non-biased rather than getting a judge from your political opponent's donor file?
I'm well aware that you're not asking a hypothetical. You're asking me to comment on a jury verdict in another jurisdiction which has to be respected. I won't comment on it. That case is still ongoing. The defendant
Mr. Attorney General, I hadn't asked you about the verdict yet. We were getting there. I was talking about the judge. And so let me ask you this question about your time as a judge. Was there ever a time when you were a judge when you had a family member who was personally profiting off of the notoriety of a case that was before your court?
I'm going to say again, it's very clear you're asking me to comment on a case in another jurisdiction.
No, wait, hold on, Mr. Attorney General. Did you ever have a family member?
See, this is theater. And the fact that this clown, and I please come after me for slander. I would love to just repeat myself. This is what we have in Congress. This kind of asinine behavior of trying to lead a witness or pursue an agenda by just reiterating whatever, regardless of the facts, regardless of the law, as Merrick is trying to point out, to achieve a goal. And like, it's just, yes, there's politicking, right? There is using your words, your time to speak, to try and gain advantage, right? But this isn't that. This isn't trying to get funding for a bridge in your district. This isn't trying to get a defense contract in your district. This isn't trying to renovate a school or a hospital in your district. This is literally trying to put the Attorney General on the spot about a politically charged question to justify whatever impropriety that you're pushing about the indictment. I don't even want to give this guy time on my channel, but I'm trying to get to the
notoriety
question.
of any case that you sat over.
Say again, you're asking
Yes or no?
me, you're asking me to comment on a case currently.
Well, it seems you're
before
connecting the
another-
dots, Mr. Attorney General. I'm just asking you as to a general principle, but you are aware that Judge Merchan's daughter was profiting off of this prosecution. You are aware that that creates the appearance of impropriety. You know the very reason there's a federal rule against judges giving donations is because it is the very attack on the judicial process that we're concerned about.
I'm sorry, I don't agree with anything you just said, but I'm not going to comment on a.
Okay,
on an
so you
action
won't comment on it,
before.
Mr. Attorney General, but you had no problem dispatching Matthew Colangelo. Who's Matthew
That is
Colangelo?
false. I did not dispatch Matthew Colangelo.
Matthew
That's false.
Matthew Colangelo became the Assistant Attorney General at the very beginning of the Biden administration. Without having been Senate confirmed, goes and gets this senior role at the DOJ, and then after, I believe it's Gupta replaces Colangelo, Colangelo makes this remarkable downstream career journey from the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and then pops up in Alvin Bragg's office to go get Trump. And you're saying that's just a career choice that was made that has nothing to do with the lawfare coordinated by
I'm
the
saying it's false. I did not dispatch Mr. Colangelo anywhere.
Well, do you know how he ended up there?
I assume he spoke, he applied for a job there and got the job.
But see, you know what?
I can tell you I had nothing to do with it.
Well, you might not have had anything to do with it, but we've got this contemporaneous evidence in Mr. Pomerantz's book. So Pomerantz writes this-
Contemporaneous. That's one of those legal words I was looking for earlier. Contemporaneous evidence. That's a good one. That's like the most intelligent thing he said. It is a term commonly used in legal proceedings to establish the timing and sequence of events. Contemporaneous evidence, such as photographs, testimonies, or documents created immediately after an event, holds great importance in legal proceedings due to its reliability and credibility. Okay, so he's alleging that this prosecutor, who was a part of the Department of Justice, knew that Donald Trump was going to get prosecuted and then whisked himself all the way to New York to try and get on it so he could stick it to him. That's a stretch.
book, which I'm sure you're aware of, where he says, we put together the legal eagles to get Trump. We got all these folks together and we assembled them for that purpose. And so when we on the Judiciary Committee think about attacks on the judicial process, our concern is that the facts and the law aren't being followed. A target is acquired here, Trump, and then you assemble the legal talent from DOJ, Mr. Pomerantz, and you bring everybody in to get him. And meanwhile, the judge is making money on it. The judge is making money on it, or the judge's family is making money on it for stuff that you yourself wouldn't do. You know, no one's going to buy this. No one's going to believe it. It's going to create great disruption. And I am saddened by it because, like you, I have given my life to the law. I care deeply about the law, and I think that the lawfare we've seen against President Trump will do.
What? The guy who was charged with transporting girls across state lines, you care about the... Oh, my God. The audacity.
Great damage well beyond our time in public service. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Ranking members recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, do you want to respond to anything in Mr. Gates' tirade?
I think everything he was talking about was a case in another jurisdiction, an independent prosecutor, Mr. Pomerantz, worked for that independent prosecutor. I don't know Mr. Pomerantz. I don't know what's in his book, but these are decisions made in another office independent of the Justice Department.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. Last week, as we all know, a jury of his peers convicted former President Trump on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records of the first degree. The case was brought by the Manhattan DA, so it is a state case, not a federal case. I shouldn't have to ask you this, Mr. Attorney General, but since the majority seems to be confused, can you please explain the difference between a state case and a federal case?
Yes, the Manhattan District Attorney has jurisdiction.
All right, I have to make a funny quip. Mr. Judge, Your Honor Garland, your voice is a little raspy, and there is, in fact, a water bottle right there. You might want to take a quick sip.
Over cases involving New York state law, completely independent of the Justice Department, which has jurisdiction over cases involving federal law. We do not control the Manhattan District Attorney. Manhattan District Attorney does not report to us. The Manhattan District Attorney makes its own decisions about cases that he wants to bring under his state law.
Thank you.
Don't buy another pair of glasses until you've seen what this new invention.
Speaker Johnson,
so here's again what frustrates me about American politics, but is the only reason why people like you and me actually could get involved in American politics, and how we saw with Marjorie Taylor Greene and now I forgot the other lady's name, the lady with black hair who is a grandmother. Anyway, those two made it into office by sheer, I guess, audacity, just shaking their fist loud enough and long enough on social media to be taken seriously enough within their constituency to get elected. But once in, they were literally clueless. So that's the beauty of the American political process. But criminy, we have some winners in office. And honestly, I really think there should be standards. I think there needs to be, obviously, ethical standards, right? It's not enough to just swear on the Constitution. Lauren, that's right, Lauren Boebert. Thank you, Oshun. It's not enough to just swear an oath. I mean, if you say things like women don't have rights and we should ban books, and gay people don't have rights and we shouldn't allow women to have body autonomy, like, that's violating the Constitution. That's violating federal law. Like, those statements are in stark contrast to established law. And if nothing else, it's human rights violation, which is international law, right? And okay, nothing supersedes the Constitution, whatever. But like, if your argument is morality and ethics, and your statements are in stark contrast to the established morality and ethics, and you're not even using logic, you're using religious belief on top of that, I mean, that should be an immediate, just the barest minimum, immediate, no questions asked, barring from being able to run for office at any level. I am fairly certain we would have a much better country if that were the case.
Think about any Republicans planning on boycotting Netanyahu's address when it happens. Do you think that Senator Schumer, Congressman Jeffries are going to encourage Democrats to attend?
Bernie
what do you make of the number of Democrats who are potentially going to boycott it when it happens?
I was on a Sunday show, Fox News Sunday this weekend, and they played a tape of Bernie Sanders, Senator Bernie Sanders, who said terrible things about Prime Minister Netanyahu and said that he would boycott the address. So be it. I made the point. Bernie Sanders has taken the side. He was parroting the talking points of Hamas and the Ayatollah in Iran. This is a time to choose a side. If Bernie Sanders wants to side with the terrorists, that's Ayatollah in Iran. This is a time to choose a side. If Bernie and the Ayatollah in Iran. This is a time to choose a side. If
out of the mouth of the speaker himself, folks. This is obviously not the topic we were trying to discuss, but hey, this is, in fact, the time to decide whose side you are on. On the one hand, Israel, backed by the Western powers, primarily the United States of America, with their military and funding, i.e. nuclear weapons, i.e. Generation 6 fighter craft, and the latest or greatest missiles, arms, and whatever have you. Palestine and Hamas, who don't have a land, who don't have an infrastructure, who don't have an economy, who don't have a standing military, who don't have access to guns or weapons or fighter jets or nuclear weapons or anything, hasn't actually issued any sort of attack in the past 5 months, and who are currently being starved to death in front of the entire world. choose a side. I think it's a pretty easy choice. Palestine every single day of the week. And you're right. Now they're gonna try and say that Bernie Sanders is Hamas, even though Bernie Sanders is literally Jewish.
Bernie Sanders wants to side with the terrorists. That's so be it. And if other Democrats want to do that, it's on them. But I'm telling you, I pray and hope and expect that most of the members of the House of both parties and the Senate will join us for this historic address. It's really important for us to hear directly from the Prime Minister of Israel at this.
The Prime Minister of Israel has been very direct. Like, what? Okay. Netanyahu has said he wants to erase Palestine. Am I missing something? The Associated Press. Netanyahu remarks to erase Palestinian town inappropriate. Netanyahu says Israel's goal is to wipe out all possibility of Palestinian state. That is from, I guess, truthout.org. That's probably biased. Israel Finance Minister on NBC News calls to erase Palestinian village was inappropriate. Oh, that's what that one was about. Okay. Let's go with 2024 because he has changed his tune. Why is Israel demolishing Palestinian homes? Is Palestinian a country or a part of Israel? It's actually its own country that has been taken over and colonized by Israel. Let's see. Where's the videos? Come on. So Netanyahu rejects U.S. blueprint. Netanyahu, the war in Gaza. So that's CBN News, PBS News, ABC News, January 18th, 2024. He rejects the creation of a Palestinian state. Netanyahu plans to expand war into Lebanon, January 3rd, 2024. Netanyahu says Israel won't heed growing calls for ceasefire, October 30th, 2023. So that was Immediately after the attacks. Israeli, let's see. Israel defense minister criticizes Netanyahu's Gaza strategy, and then he pushed back against criticism from his own government. Netanyahu literally, figuratively, not hyperbole, not we're putting words into his mouth, not we're trying to like overanalyze. He has verbatim said throughout just the past few months alone that he wants to eliminate Palestine in its entirety. He's using Hamas as an excuse, but he's not stopping there. Hamas is in Lebanon. Hamas is in every other country that has interests for Israel and, by extension, the U.S. So again, a rogue nation state or a victim. Pretty easy to decide. And no, we do not need to give a platform to this war criminal in our own damn country. Are you kidding me?
Pivotal moment in history. We need to hear his take and his account of what's happening there.
This cretin would have probably invited Hitler to America in the midst of World War II to speak about the Jewish condition. That's the kind of scumbag this guy is, and that is the 100% equivalent of inviting Netanyahu right now, who is currently engaging in genocide against Palestinians. That is an absolute fact. That is an absolute, correct, historically accurate parallel to draw.
And I think it'll be a very important thing. We need to show bipartisan support for our closest ally in the Middle East, for all the...
No, we don't. We really don't. And here's why. If our closest partner in the Middle East is committing war crimes, we should be condemning them, slashing that partnership, and holding them accountable, not aiding and abetting. That is the bipartisan act and activity that we should be engaging in, is arresting the war criminal and every person in the administration and the military, whatever, that was facilitating it.
The obvious reasons.
Jesus.
It's the only
And this is only 2 minutes.
And we've got to allow them to prosecute this war so that peace can be brokered back in the region. And I think it's really important for everybody to come. And even if you have misgivings about it, come and listen. I mean, this is a really important moment for the Congress. And I was told that, I was reminded that it will be an historic address for Prime Minister Netanyahu. He'll be the first foreign head of state to address the Congress 4 times. The record is a tie right now between he and I think Winston Churchill, maybe one other. But
So Winston Churchill, which was also historically not the greatest guy, but was our ally during World War II, addressed our country's Congress, probably to say, hey, we kind of need your help or the Nazis are going to win. And Netanyahu, who is literally erasing Palestinians from existence. That's not a good look. And now that guy is going to have the record for head of state, the guy who is erasing a people from existence. Oh, I did not expect. Well, first of all, I thought we were going to see Bernie Sanders and him go at it, not just whatever the hell that was. So I apologize. That is, and we only got a few minutes, 20 minutes left or so. Wow. That went off. Whew. These be dangerous and historic times is the main takeaway. Actually, one of the things I did want to talk about today was the sheer amount of assassinations that occurred in during this past election in Mexico. So, Mexican assassinations during recent election. Disregard my typos. Please.
Mexico peso drops as much as 4.1% against the dollar, and the local stock market fell over 2% following the rule of Morena Party's strong election performance, raising fears of potential constitutional changes that could undermine checks and balances. The peso later trimmed its losses to 3.2% drop. Claudine Sheinbaum landslide presidential victory and Morena's gains surprised markets, with Chris Turner from ING noting concerns about Morena potentially pursuing market non-friendly policies of constitutional reform. Sheinbaum secured between 58.3 to 60.7 and 60.7 of the vote, and the highest Mexico majority history. Despite market jitters, Sheinbaum's acceptance speech aimed to reassure markets by emphasizing a commitment to an autonomous central bank, maintaining the division between economic and political powers, and persevering a disciplined fiscal stance, as noted by J.P. Morgan. Ricky, what's going on with Mexico right now?
Oh, man. You know, when I'm talking to people, you know, as you guys know, 80% of my family's in Mexico. My dad lives in Mexico. You know, when I'm a dual citizen, I'm a Mexican citizen, American citizen. And when you see things like that, basically what they're going through is they've had so many years of corruption. With it used to be more of a two-party system, which was el PRI y el PAN, which is two-party system. Then they kind of started doing Morena, you know, all this other stuff they started coming up with to break up the two-party system. And then what ended up happening was that AMLO, which is a current president, he's our version of a Bernie Sanders, ran for president two presidencies ago, lost. He says he got cheated out of his presidency. And by the way, 100%. When Enrique Peña Nieto and him were running, which was the last president, they took it from him, and they say they stole the election, which I believe in Mexico. It's very, very much real. A lot of intimidation. They'll do care packages. You know, here it's illegal to do that in Mexico. At the voting booth, they'll do a care package, rice, soap, food, beans, and say,
you're serious.
oh yeah, of course, you can look it up.
That's highly illegal
You
in
can look it
America.
up. They'll give you, and then I'll tell you, who gave you this? Morena. Who gave you this? Morena. Who gave you Morena? So they'll literally be at the voting booth. You give them a care package and they're switching their vote.
Wow.
Yeah, and this is not
My
like
rice is better.
yeah, exactly. Matter of fact, when the cartels want somebody voted in, they'll do the same thing. This is on behalf of so and so. This obviously is funded through them. But anyway, going back to this, it's a lot of people. I was getting 80%, 90%.
So quick, we're gonna be going over our 3 hours here. So let's just be real. But to the point of the cartels basically giving food and support to the population in order to garner favor, that's literally what the mobsters did in America too. That's of course the one that I was thinking of. That name is now just AMLO. What was helping the people? Yeah. No, but they were saying the cartels were doing the same thing, and I forget which gangster it was. Al Capone. He was literally the first one. I think it was Al Capone who literally invented the concept of soup kitchens or something like that. It was something that had been not done before, but during the Prohibition and of course the Great Depression, he literally took care of people, and so as he was robbing banks and everything else, people were like, yeah, I saw nothing. And so, to be fair, now instead of Al Capone, it's the Boeing CEO and Raytheon and all them fun people.
People say, man, we're Mexico screwed, but then you have the victims, the crybabies. Oh, they're doing a lot for the people. It's like, no, you guys want to condemn the rich and give it to the poor like you guys are some goddamn Robin Hoods. And so my issue with her more than anything is you got to remember Mexico is a Catholic country.
I remember.
She doesn't have the beliefs. So,
well, I wasn't
first
there,
of all,
but
her family
you know what I mean.
got here in the
I remember reading
1920s,
about that.
which that's fine. That doesn't give you. I'm here in America. I'm a first generation. My devotion's to America. But they got here in the 1920s. They're Jewish, and her parents were communists, open communists that actually fought hard in the rebellion, and they were involved in the scandal with the papers in Panama. So it's not like they're lightweights. Just let's just voice our opinion. No, they're hardcore, and they raise her with these hardcore communist values. And so on top of that, she's
is this the part where we bash anything that remotely resembles taking care of people, i.e. your citizens, i.e. the whole premise of a government in the first place, whether that's a national, state, or a local government? I mean, again, human beings are social creatures. That's why we established tribes, which eventually evolved into villages, and then villages into towns, towns into cities, cities into city-states, city-states into principalities, principalities into kingdoms, kingdoms into nations. I mean, nations into empires, technically, but you get the point. Like, what? I guess PBD is conservative leaning.
But just by the way, and I might probably get some heat for this. I really don't give a shit. I don't think any woman should be running any president. The temperament is not there. They're irrational. They don't.
Y'all, holy Christ, did he just say that? What in the hootie hay? Did I not hear him correctly? Is that what he actually said?
So it's not like they're lightweights. Just let's just voice our opinion. No, they're hardcore, and they raise her with these hardcore communist values. And so on top of that, she's a feminist. But just by the way, and I might probably get some heat for this. I really don't give a shit. I don't think any woman should be running any president. The temperament is not there. They're irrational. They don't think with the level head. But that's beside the point.
Communist bashing? Sure. Whatever. Communist bashing, right? Am I right? Communist bashing. We can argue about communism. That's fine. That's fine. But he found a way to straight up be a sexist bastard. He was like, you know what? Not only am I going to bash communism, but I'm also going to say that I don't think women should have authority at all. I don't respect women. You're right. None of his opinions matter after that statement. I actually thought we would have gotten some sort of insight about like the cartels or talking about the assassinations. And for the first 3 minutes or so, 2 minutes or so, he was giving like, yeah, there is a lot of corruption. They are handing out food and snacks and beer at the polling centers. And sometimes the cartels are doing the same thing and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, wow, did not know that. That's pretty awful. And then he's like, yeah, and by the way, women suck. Jesus.
So I understand people wanting to change from the PRI and the PAN and wanting to get away from it. I get it. It's like getting away from the Democrats and the Republicans and go libertarian.
Well, you're right. I mean, at this point, this isn't very credible. Good Lord. Folks, maybe I should really do a little bit more planning ahead instead of like, hey, you know, it'd be really fun, guys, if we just looked at this. Apparently, I should not be doing that because that was a gem. Wow. Oh. Speaking of our venerated allies, we're not going to go over this whole thing because I don't have... I think my throat isn't going to last an hour of this, and it's apparently I'm struggling to maintain the the lighting in here, so without it looking like the sun is coming after me. But I digress. Let's see what this is about.
Watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma.
Okay, let's skip
And
ahead.
why do adults dream about school exams, like not knowing the answers or reaching late or being lost? We'll tell you what science says about this. All this and more coming up. The headlines first.
Okay, I was gonna say, are
Look
we
who's
gonna?
preaching peace. China calls for a peace conference to end the Israel-Hamas war. Beijing is hosting several Arab leaders this week. China is positioning itself as a mediator in the Gaza conflict. In India, campaigning ends for the 7th and last phase of the general election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Kanyakumari. He will meditate for nearly 2 days. The final phase of voting is on Saturday. The election results will be announced on the 4th of June. Election campaigning ends in Mexico as well, but violence mars the last day with several candidates being attacked. At least 50 candidates have died since October. On Sunday, nearly 100...
Wow. So it's more than 37. There we go. See, okay. Whatever this news network is, first post.
100 million people will vote to choose Mexico's new president. The Spanish parliament passes a contentious amnesty bill for Catalan separatists. In 2017, there was a failed independence bid. The controversial bill annuls the legal records of those involved in it. It was a demand by separatist parties who helped the Spanish prime minister remain in office. Senegal's new president, on his first visit to junta-ruled Mali and Burkina Faso, he wants to strengthen ties with the two states who have quit the regional bloc ECOWAS. In April, the Senegalese leader became Africa's youngest elected president. And French pharmacists, on their first strike in a decade, they're protesting over drug shortages, low prices, and the threat from medicines being sold online. In the last 10 years, around 2,000 pharmacies have gone out of business across France.
Damn. So it's yay capitalism, just causing problems left, right, and center. We just, you know what? I was kind of hoping we're gonna get to this, but the lead. Oh, okay. This is the thing. This is the thing. We don't need the 1990s video game animation.
If Israel doesn't get you, the lack of aid will. There is simply no escaping it. And Israel is not slowing down. They've taken total control of Gaza's land border. Let me show you the map. Gaza borders two countries, Israel and Egypt. The Egypt border has a demilitarized buffer zone. It is called the Philadelphia Corridor. A demilitarized buffer zone. It's around 300 feet wide, and Israel has taken control of it. The question is why? This is what Israel's army says.
Oh, this guy.
The Philadelphia Corridor served as Hamas's pipeline through which Hamas engaged in smuggling in Gaza Strip on regular basis.
So that's why Israel says Hamas is using this corridor mainly to smuggle weapons. But Egypt has denied this. They say that there were no tunnels between Gaza and Egypt. And this will complicate matters because Egypt and Israel signed a peace deal back in 1979. They agreed to, on a crucial point here, that the border will remain demilitarized, meaning few or no soldiers will be deployed here. But Israel is risking that.
It's not just that everything is Hamas, it's that they are now going to escalate the conflict into Egypt.
Will Egypt respond in kind, or do they have patience left? That is the big question at the moment. Meanwhile, in Rafah, the attacks continue. Israel is pursuing two strategies. The first is airstrikes, the second is street fighting. On Wednesday,
Airstrikes
around 50
against
strikes
Rafah
were reported in Gaza. Many of them were on Rafah. Israeli aircraft swooped in. They dropped the payload and flew off. Take a look at this.
Well, since we don't have a global war on terror, we have to have an excuse to stay in the Middle East.
Israel's goal is to eliminate the Hamas, but most of their fighters are inside Rafah's tunnels. So how do these strikes help? Well, that's the thing. The strikes are not just meant for Hamas, they're meant to scare Rafah residents too, to make them flee. Just consider the airstrike on Sunday, the one that killed 45 Palestinian civilians. That strike led to an exodus of Gazans. Now look at the difference in the satellite pictures. You can see the camps empty out.
And where are they going? Where can they go?
The situation is scary. With all the shelling, the children are scared. We have no place left to stay.
So the strikes drive people out, which brings us to Israel's second strategy, street fighting. It's pretty intense stuff. Israeli tanks and soldiers have reached central Rafah. They're fighting with Hamas operatives. But how long will this continue? Israel's national security advisor gave a grim timeline. He says another 7 months. That's how long it will continue. That's the whole of 2024, another 7 months. Now, this timeline raises several questions. Number one, what kind of casualties are we looking at? The war in Gaza has been on for almost 8 months already. It has killed more than 36,000 people in this time.
Because they can no longer count them.
Now add another 7 months to it. How many more people will die? And question number two, why will it take 7 months? Rafah is the only city still standing. Netanyahu himself called it the last phase of the war. Why would this last phase take 7 more months? And what comes after that? Will it be a civilian alternative to Hamas or an Israeli military occupation? Prime Minister Netanyahu is yet to answer any of these questions. His officials are basically winging the war. The US is not too happy about this. Apparently, that's where Washington draws the line. Bombing refugees, no problem. Post-war plan, big problem. But others are...
Yeah, she's right. She's right, because I think the bigger issue is that the U.S. wants to profit off of the post-war and not just continue the atrocities unabated. I think that we're going to... good on her. What was her name? Does it say who the correspondent is? Hopefully I didn't actually click on that. Does it say? With Palki Sharma. You have my badge of support. You're getting... Oh, I have to sign in order to... then we'll go ahead and share and copy so I can put it on my thing. Anyway, the phasing is coming down, and now this is getting a little fuzzy. I'll have to figure that out as, I guess, we continue on with our streams here. But in general, I think we did cover a lot of ground. I think we had a lot of good discussion, a lot of good engagement, and I'm hoping that this continues so that we can build something constructive, right? Every streamer's like, oh, so we can build a community. No, I want to build a, shall we say, revolution. I want to build an organization. I want to build an infrastructure of change, not led by me, but built by all of us, led by all of us, for the sake of all of us. And if we can accomplish that goal, we can start putting an end to the atrocities that are not just happening across the pond, but here at home as well. So on that note, I think we'll call it a good evening, a good stream. See you tomorrow.